Welcome. You found your way into another slow, quiet descent into the folds of forgotten time. Tonight we will travel far, across millennia, to a world built from river mud and sun-baked dreams. Then we will shift our gaze to the rise and quiet unraveling of Sargon of Akkad's mighty empire. Later, we'll peer into the puzzle of a story partially lost to time. The Epic of Gilgamesh, and the tablet that no one can quite find. Finally, we will slip past the bronze gates into a Babylonian palace, where secrets, stars, and soft-spoken seers whisper into the ears of kings. Ancient Mesopotamia home to the earliest cities, the earliest laws, and the earliest bureaucrats. Breathe slowly. The past is already still. And now, so are you. We will begin in the narrow courtyards and echoing halls of the scribal schools, where the rhythm of civilization was carved into clay, one stylus stroke at a time. Let your mind settle. Sumer, the very word echoes with the sounds of civilization's birth. This cradle of mankind gave us law, language, and literature. They emerged suddenly on the historical stage around 2800 BCE. Scribes were the elite. The educated few who wielded the power of literacy. It was an arduous task, even for the most gifted. And at the heart of this power lay the scribes of Sumer, the architects of knowledge whose contributions shaped the course of history. If you're as passionate about history as we are, then be sure to stay tuned for more updates. Thanks for watching. They were the ones who ensured that the world never forgot. Learning to read and write meant years of dedicated study, memorizing hundreds of signs and their pronunciations. To become a scribe was a significant achievement, a testament to one's dedication and intellect. They were highly respected in society. Their work was essential to the functioning of the city-states, and they enjoyed a high status. Scribes oversaw trade, managed temples, and recorded history. They were the architects of knowledge, crafting clay tablets that served as the memory of generations past. Their influence was vast, shaping the course of history with every stroke of their stylus. And yet, despite their importance, scribes were largely anonymous. Their names were lost to time, their faces unknown. They toiled in the shadows, their contributions often overlooked. But without them, society as we know it would not have been possible. They were the unsung heroes of ancient Sumer, and just as suddenly, they were gone by 2000 BCE, yet they left behind a legacy that echoed for millennia. Imagine yourself, small, tired, and sore. You are 6 years old. The sun has barely risen above the horizon, but your day has already begun in the tablet house, the Edaba. You sit cross-legged on a hard clay bench. In front of you is a small wet tablet, freshly smoothed. You're expected to copy 20 symbols before breakfast. Your fingers are cramped from yesterday, and the stylus, a sharpened reed, blisters your hand anew. The room smells faintly of dust, sweat, and wet earth. Your instructor, a senior scribe known only by his title, paces slowly behind the class. He taps his wooden switch against his palm. Every error earns a sharp correction. There are many errors, and no one praises the correct strokes. By midday, the sun bakes the walls, and your knees ache. You've moved on to more complicated lists now. Animals, weights, months, kings, gods, hundreds of signs. All with meaning and pronunciation to be memorized and replicated flawlessly. This is your life for years. There are no toys, no games, just clay and your role in shaping order out of the world's confusion. Eventually, you graduate if you're lucky. Most do not. You enter the workforce of scribes, not as a poet, not as a historian, but as a record keeper. You copy receipts, contracts, grain measurements, and tax codes. The day is long and repetitive. You write with precision, but you are invisible. Your work forms the spine of society. You know this. You also know no one will thank you. Still, the stylus in your hand is powerful, more powerful than the sword, because once something is written, it is remembered, at least for a while. Epic of Gilgamesh, the first known story ever told. It came from here, along with the world's first known city, the first known queen. And at the heart of it all, writing, gave Sumer its name. Its people, the Sumerians, believed their language was the script of the gods themselves, called it cuneiform, wedge-shaped, like the shape of a plow cutting into the soil. Cuneiform would become the dominant script of the ancient Near East, a region that included modern-day Iraq, Kuwait, Turkey, Syria, Iran, and parts of Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And it spread far and wide. Over 100,000 clay tablets have been found in this area, more than double the number of Egyptian artifacts. One can almost hear the echo of those countless voices whispering across the millennia. But who were the Sumerians? Don't know much about them, really. Writing in Sumer was not merely a tool, it was a privilege, almost a priesthood. In the ancient world, information was power. This is our series. We bring you the finest historical tales, bringing history to life through the art of storytelling. The name Sargon echoes faintly through the ages, a name that means true king in a language long unspoken. Sargon of Akkad, a man who rose from obscurity, perhaps a gardener's apprentice, perhaps a cupbearer to rule over the first known empire in human history. His empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Her name was a tar goddess, and she was unlike any other woman in the kingdom. She had princes from neighboring lands, men who boasted of their lineage and lands, men who thought they could cage the desert wind. They shared their bounty, they mended broken walls, and most importantly, they listened. They heard the whispers in the bazaars, the murmurs in the fields. And when they learned that the neighboring city of Kish was suffering, they sent aid. This act of kindness was recorded on a clay tablet, not by a scribe, but by Sargon himself. It reads, "When I saw their plight, my heart had compassion for them." And it's a rare glimpse into the heart of a legend. A reminder that even in the grand tale of empires, it's the small acts of kindness that echo the loudest. But a tar goddess saw through them. She didn't want a cage. She wanted to fly. And in Sargon, she saw a kindred spirit, someone who looked at her and saw not a prize to be won, but a partner to rule beside. Together they planned, they plotted, and soon they were ready. With Sargon's charm and a tar goddess's wit, they rallied the people, the merchants, the artisans, the shepherds, and the farmers. All who had known oppression under the old regime flocked to their banner. Their army grew, not in numbers, but in spirit. And when they marched to the palace, it wasn't with weapons, but with words. The old king had toppled, not by strength, but by the sheer force of their will. And so Sargon, the gardener's son, became king and a tar goddess. The princess who yearned to fly became queen. You see, a tar goddess wasn't content with weaving tapestries or making perfume. She wanted more. Oh yes, she wanted to rule. Now, when Sargon first laid eyes on a tar goddess, he knew two things. One, he was smitten, head over heels in love. And two, this was his chance, his opportunity to get that power he so craved. So he did what any lovesick young man would do, poured all his love, all his devotion into poetry and songs. And let me tell you, his heart poured out like wine from a broken jug. Every verse, every note was a love song. A love song to a woman who loved freedom more than finery, who loved adventure more than jewels. But what we know of him is written by scribes. They preserved his triumphs, perhaps exaggerated them. They recited how he defeated 30 kings in battle, how the gods smiled upon him. But Sargon himself is elusive. His clay legacy comes to us not in his own words, but through those who served him. The scribes of Akkad crafted not just records, but legends. They painted him as chosen by Inanna, the goddess of war and love. His deeds were sung in court and etched in temple libraries. Yet as his descendants took the throne, those same scribes had to rewrite the story. For Sargon's empire began to crack. Revolts rose in distant cities. Famine crept across the land. Trade routes faltered. The scribes recorded offerings made to the gods to appease their anger. Eventually, the empire dissolved. Slowly, without a single dramatic collapse. It faded, but the legend remained. Sargon's story's rise and fall reminds us how those who hold the stylus shape more than inventory lists. They shape memory. And sometimes, they leave behind puzzles that even modern archaeologists struggle to complete.
Ow.
You know how stories go. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, lived a boy who was destined to become king. Okay, maybe not that one. Let me try again. Once upon a time, in a land not so far from where the sun rises, lived a young man who tended the king's garden. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. This was no ordinary garden. It was a riot of colors and scents, a banquet for the eyes and the nose. Here, amidst the fragrant myrrh and the vibrant lilies, a young man named Sargon dreamed not of flowers, but of crowns. You see, Sargon wasn't content with pruning vines or planting seeds. He yearned for more, something greater, something that smelled like power and looked like gold. Now, the king whose garden Sargon helped take care of had a daughter, a beautiful princess with eyes as dark as the night sky and a spirit as wild as the desert winds. Now, Sargon wasn't the only suitor or target he's had. Oh no. Together, they ruled not just wisely, but fairly. We're going back to ancient Mesopotamia today, to its capital city, a place whose influence still resonates across the globe, but whose name no longer does. In fact, most folks don't even realize that it was ever there. This is about lost cities and epic poems, about how even the greatest works can be ruined by crumbling tablets. It was found in Susa, a UNESCO World Heritage Site today, the capital of Iran's Elam province. The first pages of my favorite translation contain a quote from Professor Stephanie Daly. In the Elamite version, she greets them from the top of the city wall, her eyes on Gilgamesh. That's new. Gilgamesh is flattered. Enkidu isn't. She's furious that Gilgamesh rejected her and she wants to punish him. The next day, however, he wakes up feeling pretty terrible. Remember how Gilgamesh felt terrible about all the damage the bull caused? Well, in the dream, he hears a voice telling him that Enkidu will die. In response, Gilgamesh becomes inconsolable. He spends 6 days crying. We just don't know what. Imagine a scribe thousands of years ago, hunched over in a low-lit room, carefully copying lines from an older version. He doesn't know that this version will be the last surviving one, that his careful hands will preserve or erase parts of a story meant to last forever.
Oh.
So here's a fun exercise. Take the clues we have, play around with the text a little bit, and let your imagination run wild, because the epic remains open. A literary wound we accept, a reminder that stories like cities and kings are vulnerable. On the 7th day, he meets with Shamash, the sun god, and begs him to reverse the curse. No dice. Gods are not to be trifled with. So Gilgamesh sets off on a journey. He wants to find Utnapishtim, the only human who didn't die in the Great Flood. If anyone can reverse the curse, it's him. That's the journey we know. But what did the Elamite version say? What happened in the city? What happened to the characters? He remembers how much destruction the bull caused. All the damage, all the death. So he goes out into the city, walks through the streets until he finds someone who needs help. Fixes a house, plants a garden, tend to livestock, anything to make up for the damage the bull caused. He spends the rest of the day working until the sun goes down. Then he heads home, lays down to sleep and dreams. The bull destroys everything in sight and Gilgamesh is forced to kill it. Now, if you're familiar with the biblical story of Noah, you might hear echoes of that here. For one thing, there's a line from the later version that reads, Gilgamesh shaved off his hair and beard. Gilgamesh rules Uruk. Ishtar rules Uruk. They're supposed to be rivals. So what could it mean? A lot of scholars think the standard Babylonian version represents the last stage of the epic's development. And in this version, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are friends, not lovers. That's certainly what it seems like. But the Elamite version adds a lot of extra details that highlight their relationship. They sleep in the same bed. They share the same blanket. At one point, Gilgamesh puts his arm around Enkidu's shoulder. In the later version, those details are gone. That's a big deal. You see, Gilgamesh is usually depicted as a handsome young man with flowing locks. His friend Enkidu is always clean-shaven. He's usually depicted as a hairy wild man. Gilgamesh shaves his head in mourning. This detail tells us that things weren't great in the city. Something bad must have happened. Some scholars think the biblical story was directly inspired by the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Great Flood, the story of Utnapishtim, that might all come from here. But the connection isn't obvious. Let's keep going. He tells Gilgamesh to ignore her. But Gilgamesh is blinded by beauty and enamored by her praise. He invites her into the city. That's also new, and that causes trouble. You see, in the later version, Ishtar is furious because Gilgamesh rejected her advances. Here she's doing him a favor. Well, technically she's doing the city a favor. He's making it rain, but she's really watching Gilgamesh. She wants him to notice her. She gets mad, her bull shows up. It wreaks havoc, trampling fields, tearing up gardens, killing people. So Gilgamesh decides to hunt it down. Enkidu begs him not to. He thinks it's a trick, but Gilgamesh ignores him. That too is new. She wrote, no one could have predicted at the time of its discovery that the Elamite version of the epic would prove to be such a disturbing phenomenon, or that it would raise so many problems for scholars, or that it would lead to such lively scholarly debate. Yeah, that's putting it lightly. Since then, the scholarly debate has only grown. More fragments have turned up, including a few more lines of Tablet V. We know what comes before. We know what follows. But in between, silence. I mean, sure, we have some clues. There are hints in the later version, echoes that remind us something happened. But exactly what? That's the great mystery. In the early 1900s, it was believed to be the missing link, a piece that would solve the puzzle, but it didn't fit. Unlike the standard Babylonian version, which is written in Babylonian cuneiform, the Susian version is written in Elamite. Both languages belong to the same language family. They're related, because they're written in different scripts. Scholars have had a much harder time comparing them. Plus, they also come from different periods. The Elamite copy was written around 500 years earlier. It was edited to make it more coherent. Someone went through and corrected some of the lines to match what came later. So instead of filling in the gaps, it just created more questions. Why was it altered? Was there a fuller version somewhere else? And what did it say that was lost? I'm here to tell you about the greatest poem that was never meant to be finished. The Epic of Gilgamesh has to be the most important story that you've never heard of. A story older than Homer, older than the Bible. It predates those stories by centuries, was written in a time when people thought the world was flat and gods lived among humans. Its original language is long gone. It's been translated many times since. And because it was a story meant to last forever, it survives today not as a single artifact, but as fragments. The earliest bits were carved onto clay tablets in the 26th century BCE, but these got broken. Then it was copied down again and again, updated and adapted. Later scribes added their own flourishes, which makes piecing together its history tricky. But we do have a pretty good idea of the tale because most of what we know comes from a tablet discovered in the ruins of Nineveh. In the royal library of Ashur-banipal, who ruled the Neo-Assyrian Empire in the 7th century BCE, it had been baked in a fire. Buried for centuries under sand and city, and then unearthed in 1853, and when Austin found the tablets, they were already broken into hundreds of fragments. Putting the puzzle together took another decade. Today, it's known as the Standard Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh. It covers the entirety of the story, but it's incomplete. Scholars think it's missing a few parts, including the beginning. We don't know how it started. How did Gilgamesh become king? Why does he go to the cedar forest? For that, we have to rely on other copies, bits and pieces from different cities. And here's where things get more complicated, because one of those copies is especially intriguing. It's called Tablet V. I've been talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh for years. I dedicated my undergraduate thesis to it. In the later version, after Gilgamesh kills Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest, he and Enkidu return home, and they're greeted by Ishtar, the goddess of love. In the standard Babylonian version, the bull of heaven is a punishment sent by Ishtar. After slaying the bull, Gilgamesh feels pretty proud of himself. He returns home, throws a feast. And this dream changes everything. It's here where we start hearing echoes of the old story. The Elamite version starts to fade away, and the standard Babylonian version resurfaces. Well, we have a couple of clues. Another clue comes from a hymn addressed to Ishtar. She boasts about Gilgamesh, calls him her king. Again, that doesn't seem to fit. So how do you account for that? Maybe Tablet V contains some answers. After all, we know it existed. It had to have said something. If the scribe's life was ruled by routine, the palace dweller lived by rhythm of feasts, of omens, of the slow turning of stars. Imagine gold, not as coin, but as thread, sewn into robes, adorning temple doors, flickering in lamplit banquet halls. The king sits beneath a carved frieze of lions and bulls. His counselors stand beside him, not warriors, but priests, astrologers, and scribes. For here in Babylon, power is read in the heavens, and decisions are weighed by dreams. There is something deeply satisfying about the act itself, the feel of the stylus on the clay, the neat rows of figures, the orderly pages. It is a compulsion, a need to impose some kind of sense on the chaos of the world. Without the scribe, the king would have no way of knowing what happened yesterday or 100 years ago. The scribe's records allow him to do one thing, to pretend that he, too, can read the signs, that he can understand the will of the gods. So the king keeps commissioning scribes, so the empire keeps growing, so the scribe keeps writing, ever present, ever silent. Each morning, omens are interpreted, a birth defect in a lamb, a cloud in the wrong direction. The stars whisper, and the scribes translate. Decisions are made. Feasts follow cycles, new moon festivals that last days, dishes flavored with dates, lamb and onion. But it is not endless indulgence. The court is a place of danger. Favor is fleeting. A wrong prediction may cost a position or a life. Spies hide in plain robes. Bribes are wrapped in pleasantries. Everyone watches everyone else. Still, to the outside world, Babylon seems invincible. Its ziggurats rise like stairways to the heavens. Its gardens, perhaps hanging, perhaps imagined, are the envy of the world. And at its center the scribe writes, ever present, ever silent. The scribe is a weaver of words, his loom the page. With each sunrise, he traces the shapes of clay tokens on a fresh new record, keeping the memory of the kingdom alive. Notes the tributes paid, the merchants who came bearing incense and ivory, the date when chariots rolled through the city gates, the king's good dreams, and those that troubled him. Every voice is heard. The scribe hears the baker arguing with the butcher over the price of grain, the tanner complaining of a new tax, the silversmith boasting of an order from the queen. He even hears the beggars at the temple gate, their wants and their woes. Nothing escapes his notice. The scribe is a living archive, his mind a storehouse of facts, figures, and names. He knows the number of houses in the city, the number of silver mines in the king's domain, the number of ships in the royal navy. When the king needs to know something, he sends for the scribe. How many years since the great flood? The scribe consults his tablets and tells him 420 years. How many cubits from here to the river? The scribe is measured and the answer is 12 cubits. How many talents of gold does the empire hold? The scribe knows the answer to that as well. It is 85 talents. He could tell the king the weight of every jewel in the royal crown and the length of every scar on the General S face. The scribe has seen them both. He is honored, of course, for his knowledge, but that is not why he keeps records. So now you know. Being a scribe in ancient Mesopotamia was not glorious. It was long. It was exacting. It was critically and thankless. But it was also enduring. From barley ledgers to king's boasts, from epics to oracles, their careful marks have outlasted cities, empires, even languages. They shaped memory. They built permanence from mud and thought. As you drift towards sleep, consider the quiet dignity of these invisible hands. But the need to remember, to record, to quietly persist, that has never left us. And though the world has changed, the rhythm remains. Ink has replaced clay. Screens have replaced tablets. Good night. And may the riverbanks of the past soothe your journey into rest. Welcome. Tonight we'll journey back to the dusty chambers and candlelit halls of medieval Europe. A time before germ theory, before anesthesia, before microscopes or antiseptic. A world where healing was often guesswork and pain, and near certainty. In this calm and measured story, you'll drift through the lives of physicians, charlatans, patients, monks, and kings. We'll begin in the heart of Paris, at the Latin-speaking universities where theory reigned supreme. Just a quiet walk through the foggy corridors of the past. We'll then explore a curious episode of mass hysteria, wander through cryptic alchemical texts, and finish in the perfumed but perilous world of royal medicine. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts settle. There's nothing to do, nothing to solve. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a doctor? It's not in modern times, but back when the only way to get an education was through memorizing everything about everything. Well, today we're going to find out exactly that, because I've managed to track down one of the last remaining time-traveling physicians. That's right, this is a real job. This is a real person. Welcome to my channel. You've studied Aristotle's for humor's blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black biland, learned that all illness stems from their imbalance. But you haven't touched a patient. Medical education in Paris, while prestigious, is entirely theoretical. Dissection is discouraged, even banned for a time. Church allows it only in rare circumstances. So you study diagrams, read glosses, argue, philosophize, and wait. Finally, after years of study, you are granted your doctorate. You can now wear the long robe, carry the staff, but your patients still expect urine tasting. They bring you flasks of cloudy liquid, and you peer into them with false confidence, comparing the colors to charts. You recommend bleedings based on moon phases and bodily temperament. You prescribe expensive, hard-to-find herbs. You write in Latin, but your patients can't read. If they grow worse, they might not blame you. They might blame witches or demons, but they might also blame you. The stink of unwashed bodies, rotting teeth, and festering wounds permeates your office. The streets outside overflow with mud and manure. Medicine is a profession of contradictions. Respect in theory, suspicion in practice. Still, you persist, because you believe in the order of things, the logic of balance, the promise of harmony, even if your leeches rarely deliver it. And so your days pass in a rhythm of theory and trial, prestige and pressure. Today, we re-talking to a historian of science who literally travels back in time to experience history firsthand. He's currently working on a book about medical students in Paris in the late Middle Ages, so thought he'd be a great guest for this series. So without further ado, let us send him back to medieval Paris and find out what it would be like to be a student of medicine in the 14th century. You wake up in a narrow, drafty room in 14th century Paris. The university bell has already tolled. You rise slowly, bones stiff from the hard wooden pallet, and light a stub of wax. Today, as every day, you will speak, think, and write exclusively in Latin. French is for servants. You are a physician in training. After years of tedious memorization, you can now recite Hippocrates and Galen almost by heart. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to check out the podcast available on various platforms, and don't forget to leave a review. Thanks for listening. And now, very gently, we drift forward in time to the summer of 1518. You are in Strasbourg. It is hot and the air is heavy. People are dancing in the street, not celebrating. It's not joyful. They are pale. Their eyes are vacant. Their limbs twitch with urgency, and they do not stop. Turns to night. They dance. Some collapse. Some die. The physicians are summoned, learned men with scrolls and theories. If a person was suffering from a cold humor, they were treated with something hot, like a hot bath or hot drinks. But it may have been because dancing could increase a person's temperature and make them sweat. Dancing could also be a form of exercise. Perhaps at the time, physicians thought that exercise could help cure illness. Today we know that neither of these things can cure a disease caused by an imbalance of humors. In the case of the dancing plague, physicians believed that the problem was a fever of the blood, too much heat and too much wet. There was the supernatural view, the humor theory, the folk belief that dancing could cure illness. But at the time, they were doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. In the end, the dancing plague remains a mystery. All we know for sure is that it happened, and that no one could explain it. We can marvel at the skill of the doctors who recorded its symptoms and tried to understand its causes. We can debate what might have caused it and try to understand why the treatments failed. But we can also learn something from the dancing plague. We can remember that even people with the best intentions can be wrong, and that even the most learned experts can be stumped. And then there was the practical application of those ideas. We can look back today and say that none of those ideas made any sense. But at the time, people genuinely believed that they were helping the sick. They really did think that dancing was a cure for the disease. Their solution: induce sweating and balance those humors through dancing. They rule out demonic possession. The sufferers do not speak in tongues or fear the cross. If you would like to help us make even more videos in the future, you can join our membership program today, so it must be natural. A fever of the blood, stirred by heat and humors. Their prescription: more dancing. They commission musicians, clear the market square. Why did they think that clearing the market square would help? Saint Vitus, they said, had a reputation for curing epilepsy and other seizure-like disorders. So the idea was that if you danced in his honor, he might stop the dancing plague. Did it work? Well, yes, sort of. Eventually, most of the dancers stopped. By some accounts, they died. By others, they survived. But the physicians never figured out what the disease actually was. Well, maybe they thought the cramped conditions in the square were making the disease worse. Maybe they thought fresh air would help. Or maybe they hoped that dancing in an open area would let the dancers see the sky and remind them of God. None of these ideas worked. Dancing continued and more people died. Let the dancers sweat out the illness. But it gets worse. Weeks pass, dozens more join. Some suffer heart attacks, others seize or simply fall, unmoving. The crowd watches in horrified silence. The doctors revise their theory. Some think it might have been a reaction to eating rye that was contaminated with a fungus called ergot. This fungus produces a chemical that can cause convulsions and other movement disorders. In this view, the dancing plague was a response to extreme stress, possibly brought on by the Black Death, which had hit Europe a few years before. Still others have suggested that it was a form of social contagion. In other words, once people started dancing, others joined in because they thought that's what they should do. No one knows for sure. Perhaps it's the wrath of a saint, Saint Vitus, known for seizures and twitches. Offerings are made. Masses are sung. The dancing slows. Centuries later, historians still debate ergot poisoning from moldy rye, mass psychogenic illness triggered by stress, social contagion. The records are unclear. The physician's notes are vague, but the event leaves its mark, a strange scar in the annals of medieval medicine. And you imagine the doctor, standing helpless as the people he is meant to cure, dance themselves to death. When confronted with diseases that baffled them, physicians of the 15th and 16th centuries often turned to a concept called humor. To understand humor, we have to travel back to ancient Greece. There, the philosopher Empedocles came up with a theory about the composition of the human body. According to him, we are all made of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And just like the natural world around us, our bodies are composed of different qualities: hot, cold, wet, and dry. These were the 4 humors of the body, and each person was born with a particular balance of these elements. Health, according to this view, meant that your humors were in balance. Illness meant that they weren't. In practice, this theory meant that treatments were tailored to the patient. But why did they think that dancing would help? We don't know exactly. There is another part of this story that doesn't make sense either. Then the physicians changed their tune. Today, historians aren't sure what caused the dancing plague. What makes the dancing plague so fascinating is how many different kinds of thinking it highlights. We can also look back and say that the physicians were clearly misguided. Thanks for watching this episode, and thanks especially to our supporters who make it possible for us to bring these free educational videos to everyone. Welcome to this course, where we try to get to the heart of what really matters. Today, we're going to go deep into alchemy. Let us step deeper still into shadowed libraries, behind monastery walls, where another type of healer works. The alchemist. To the world, he is a mystery. Cloaked in long robes, stained with soot and wax. He works by moonlight, murmuring Latin invocations. But before we dive into that, let's start with a quick recap of where we left off. You can see all kinds of things reflected in it. Take alchemy, for example. Chemists today still use the same equipment that alchemists did, like flasks and beakers and crucibles. For one, alchemists were really interested in chemistry and really dedicated to. Because they were so secretive about their processes, they often redid each other's work without really understanding why it worked. Well, part of it was surely the appeal of turning base metals like lead into precious ones like gold. Did they discover some chemical processes that helped improve the world? Oh yeah, for sure. To learn more about alchemy, you can check out the additional resources, and thanks for watching. And it's also possible that alchemists were onto something else, something that modern scientists have only recently discovered. One recent theory is that some alchemists may have actually succeeded in creating gold, but they were just really bad at explaining what they did. See, atoms are the basic building blocks of matter, and for a given element, all atoms are created equal. An atom of gold always has 79 protons, an atom of lead always has 82, but sometimes atoms can change the number of protons they have. This process is called nuclear transmutation, and it's generally pretty difficult. Scientists today need giant machines that cost millions of dollars to do it. But maybe some alchemists stumbled onto conditions that allowed it to happen naturally. Maybe they mixed two different compounds together in just the right way, causing a reaction that turned lead into gold. Or maybe they purified a substance so well that it started acting like a different element altogether. Today, we don't know if or how many times nuclear transmutation has happened accidentally, but a few scientists think it might not be as rare as we think. And if alchemists were actually turning lead into gold all along, that could explain why the practice endured for so long. After all, no one would want to stop doing something that worked, even if they didn't know exactly why. And because alchemy was closely related to magic, alchemists weren't always treated like scientists either. They were often accused of being sorcerers and persecuted for practicing witchcraft. But despite all those setbacks, alchemy lasted for hundreds of years. From the Middle East to Europe, people kept trying to turn lead into gold, and in the process, kept making important scientific discoveries. They had access to resources that other scientists of the day didn't have. And because they were often monks living in monasteries, they had more leisure time too, so they could spend years working on a single experiment. This meant that they often made discoveries by accident that no one else had been able to make. Take gunpowder, for example. It was invented in China around 850 CE as a way to make fireworks. But sometime after that, someone figured out that it could be used for much more destructive purposes. How exactly gunpowder made its way from fireworks to warfare is unknown. But since alchemists were experimenting with lots of different ingredients, including sulfur and charcoal, which are both found in gunpowder, it's possible that they played a role in discovering its military uses. We also have some evidence that an alchemist named Roger Bacon was the first person to describe how to make lenses for eyeglasses. And they still perform many of the same tasks, like mixing and heating substances and filtering out solids from liquids. Really, alchemy was just trying to solve some of the same problems chemists try to solve today, like how to purify silver or how to create new materials. Just that back then, alchemists didn't have any idea why the things they were doing worked. They couldn't test their results or come up with new ways to measure things. So instead, alchemy was usually tied up with magic and mysticism. Alchemists believed that everything in the universe was made of just a few basic elements, and that by combining them in certain ways, they could create anything they wanted. They kept their recipes secret and wrote about their experiments in codes. So when scientists today read ancient alchemical texts, they have to work pretty hard to figure out what they mean. If you've heard anything about it, you probably know that alchemists were obsessed with turning lead into gold. And while that was definitely a thing, it's a bit reductive to say that was all they were doing. Alchemy was also a kind of proto-science that tried to figure out the nature of materials and how to purify them. In our last episode, we talked about the humors and how they were used to explain everything from illnesses to the weather. There were 4 of them: phlegm, yellow, and black bile, and blood. Well, believe it or not, the idea that your personality could be determined by the balance of these 4 fluids for circulating around your body was actually around until the 19th century. That's a pretty good run. But why would anyone ever believe something so weird? Well, we talked about how people back then didn't have much else to go on. Science was just different. His shelves are filled with curious jars: mercury, powdered sulfur, bloodstone. He does not treat fevers or gout. He seeks transmutation, to turn lead into gold, to distill the elixir of life, to unlock divine secrets through matter. The manuscripts he writes are cryptic, dense, and symbol-laden. Dragons devour their tails. Suns rise over flasks. The language is part riddle, part code. Recipes for purification, calcination, dissolution. Some of these alchemists are sincere seekers. Others are frauds. Some poison themselves, accidentally fumes too strong, mixtures too volatile. Still others make quiet breakthroughs: distillation, solvents, dyes. The birth of early chemistry lies hidden in these pages. They are mocked by some physicians, feared by others. But their manuscripts are copied, hoarded, and sometimes burned. For knowledge, even strange knowledge, holds power. And as you picture a monk hunched over an illuminated folio, brush in hand, you sense a kind of calm. The patience of centuries. The slow unfolding of questions without answers. Alchemy, it turns out, has a lot more to do with science than you might think. So if you want to understand medieval thought, one of the best places to look is at the Times Medicine. In fact, in many ways, alchemy was indistinguishable from modern chemistry. And even though alchemy was considered a pseudoscience, something that wasn't based on the scientific method, there were real benefits to society. The problem is that alchemists weren't very good at sharing their discoveries. So what was it about alchemy that made it endure for so long? So was alchemy a sham? Not entirely. Were alchemists scientists? Not quite. Your royal patient has suffered an indignity. A wasp has crawled into his silk undergarments and bitten him on the rear. He needs more than just a salve to soothe the bite. No doubt the insect's sting has left its venom deep within his royal flesh. It could even be spreading toward his vital organs. The problem is that your patients are all members of the royal court, and if you make a mistake, they might have you put to death. Luckily, when you start the game, you'll have a few basic treatments at your disposal. And mice into the urethra, the same thing as inserting a powder made of ground lizard and mice into the urethra. Ah, you've discovered one of the many layers of royal physician. While some treatments are more effective than others, you don't always know how well they'll work until you try them. For example, before performing surgery, you'll need to determine whether your patient is suffering from an illness or injury. Many treatments in royal physician are influenced by humorism, the medieval theory of medicine which held that the body was governed by four humors or fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow, and black bile. Medieval doctors believed that food could influence these four humors. Certain foods were thought to have medicinal qualities. So while you're treating illnesses, you can also feed your patients certain dishes in order to influence their health. All the pressure of saving lives in medieval times is now in your hands. What could go wrong now? Stay tuned for more information about royal physician. And if you'd like to learn more about medieval medicine, check out the additional resources. Thanks for watching. We made sure that our recipes not only adhered to medieval practices, but also tasted delicious. You'll find authentic medieval recipes in our recipe book. So if you want to impress your friends with a nice medieval feast, you know where to look. The goal of any treatment was to balance these humors. So a patient suffering from an excess of blood might need a bloodletting, while a patient deficient in bile might need to eat a liver. You'll meet the royal jester, who will ask you to cure his crippling gambling addiction. You'll consult with the royal barber who believes he has a mysterious growth on his genitals, and you will encounter a pair of rival physicians, who will challenge you to show them the secrets of your trade. To understand how these treatments worked, we spoke with Dr. Ronald Rigo, a professor of medieval history at the University of Vermont. He also served as a consultant for Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, and we thank him for his help once again. Sword slash will require stitches, but a nosebleed can be stopped with cauterization. Getting the diagnosis right is crucial because each condition affects your reputation in different ways. If you stitch up a patient who should have had their nose cauterized, they'll get worse, and you'll lose favor with the court. So you may need to perform multiple procedures to figure out what works best for each patient. This also means that there are multiple ways to treat the same illness. For example, there are at least 3 different ways to treat a patient suffering from pestilence, a term we created to represent bubonic plague. And each method uses different ingredients and has a different success rate. The choice is yours. These include bleeding, lancing, stitching, setting bones, and prescribing medicines. Every successful treatment you record will increase your reputation in the kingdom. That reputation will affect how much people charge you for treatments, so it's in your interest to build up your repertoire. As you do, you'll also earn favor with the king, who may reward you with bonuses or grant you access to special events. And speaking of events, while most of the game is set in the royal physician's office, you'll sometimes be called to other locations around the castle, each of which is lovingly rendered down to the last detail. You'll need them all because you're going to be facing a range of ailments. You can help him out by administering a suppository made of dried human skin. Or perhaps you will be summoned to the royal menagerie, where you will need to treat a sick monkey. Here you can test out a powder made of crocodile dung and ground glass, which you can insert into the rectum of the simian patient. Once again, your tools will depend on where you are. In the menagerie, you might need to sedate an animal before treating it. To do that, you can employ the Royal Vet's Kit, which comes complete with a blow dart gun and syringe. Back in the office, you can use a range of instruments, including one of our favorites, the medieval cat's cradle, which we modeled after a 15th century illustration in the British Library. Some are common, like sprains or infected cuts, while others are far more exotic. You'll even face illnesses inspired by real historical plagues, though we never use actual disease names. because these are all fictional diseases that we created to capture the feel of those historic outbreaks. There is but one cure, a poultice of dried toads and vipers. Even the thought of it makes you queasy, but the king is waiting. And if this treatment fails, there will be no second chances. You are the king's personal physician, and today is your first day on the job. Welcome to Royal Physician, a new medical game from the makers of Surgeon Simulator and Dentist Simulator. My name is Dr. Dave, and it's my job to ensure that all the games we make are scientifically accurate. Well, maybe not that one. But for Royal Physician, we consulted real medical historians to make sure that everything from our instruments to our illnesses to our treatments were true to the medieval period. The idea is simple. You play as a medieval doctor tasked with treating everything from bee stings to bubonic plague. As you successfully treat more and more patients, you'll earn money. With that money, you can upgrade your equipment and buy new treatments like poultices, which are applied topically to reduce inflammation. They're made of ingredients like toads and vipers, which you mix together in a mortar and pestle, which we modeled after real medieval recipes. Some are gross, like the aforementioned toad and vipers treatment for wasp stings, which involves grinding up the two ingredients and mixing them with wine to form a paste. Other recipes are disgusting, like the treatment for head lice, which requires covering the patient's head with a bag full of live, writhing toads. Others are both gross and disgusting, like the treatment for gonorrhea, which involves inserting a powder made of ground lizard and mice into the urethra. Yum, but wait, you say. Is uninserting a powder made of ground lizard? Oh, and if you think you found a particularly good treatment for an ailment, you can write it down in your recipe book. For example, there's the latrine, where you might find a lord suffering from a rare bout of constipation. At every turn in Royal Physician, you'll need to use your noggin as well as your instruments. It's not only what you prescribe, but how you prescribe it that matters. Here's a little secret, straight from Professor Rigo. What would a trip to the medieval physician's office be without a few oddities? That's why Royal Physician is loaded with amusing side quests and characters. So what do you say? Do you have what it takes to be Royal Physician? And now, as the candlelight of our journey dims, we return from the corridors of medieval medicine. You have seen the slow steps of progress, the earnest mistakes, the strange remedies and quiet persistence. From crowded Paris lecture halls to royal chambers, from dancing streets to cryptic scrolls, you have walked among those who tried imperfectly to understand the body. It is easy to judge from the safety of modern knowledge, but they too were seekers, navigating mystery with the tools they had, caught between belief and observation, ritual and reason. Let that thought lull you into quiet, that even in confusion there was curiosity, even in error there was effort. And now you may rest. Sleep, knowing that time continues to unfold, and that history, with all its fumbling wonder, sleeps gently beside you. Good night. Imagine you are waking up in a Viking fishing village, sometime around the year 870. Your home is low to the ground. It's built from stone and turf, with a roof thick with sod. The smell is strong, a mixture of smoke, sea salt, wool, and fish. The skin cracked and raw at the knuckles. Spend most days hauling nets, checking traps, or gutting the day's catch by the icy shore. The ocean is your livelihood, but it does not care for your comfort. It lashes at your boat, bites your fingers, and swallows the unwary. Always fish. It is soaked into the wood of the beams, into the fibers of your clothing, into your hands. Not raids, not gold, just repetition, cold, and survival. Most days the drink is watered-down ale, just enough to keep the chill at bay. The smoke from the hearth clings to the air, never fully escaping. It holds the cold in as much as it keeps the weather out. There's no fire roaring in the hearth yet. Just the soft hiss of the wind pushing through the seams of the door. Your fingers are never still. The floor is dirt. Your hands are rough, calloused. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is cold porridge. Maybe dried fish if you're lucky. Meat is reserved for celebration. There's no privacy, no quiet. Your family lives in this single room together, children, elders, even livestock during the harshest months. Outside, the wind howls. The work is constant. When the fish are not biting, there are nets to mend, boats to patch, firewood to gather. This was the rhythm of Viking life for most. When people think of Vikings, they usually think of fierce warriors pillaging across Europe, raiding monasteries, and slaughtering hapless villagers. But for every hour spent in battle, the average Viking spent a far greater amount simply trying to survive. You share this house with your spouse, your 2 young children, your aging parents, a couple of their sheep, and your dog. Your father woke early, as he always did, to take the sheep out to pasture. Your mother is stirring porridge already. There are 40 or so houses here, each housing a nuclear family, and perhaps some extended relatives. The village has grown slowly over decades, and the bonds between families are strong. Spirit of cooperation unites the community. The longhouse you live in with your family is made from stone, but even raiders need to eat. That's why we know so much about what Vikings ate. Without it, your family could not cook, heat your home, or defend themselves against wolves. Next, you need to repair your nets. If you don't maintain your equipment, it could fall apart at the worst possible moment. Whales breach the surface, sending huge waves crashing into your vessel. Vikings loved meat, and it featured heavily in their diet. They kept livestock such as pigs, sheep, goats, and cattle, which they slaughtered for food. As darkness falls, you bring your sheep home and settle in for the night. Huddled around a fire with your family, you tell stories, sing songs, and plan for the next day. Sleep will come easy tonight. Tomorrow brings new challenges, but for now, you rest easy in the knowledge that you survived another day in the harsh but beautiful world of the Vikings. They also hunted wild animals like deer, elk, and bear. Meat was often roasted over an open fire or boiled in a large cauldron. It's hard work catching and preparing food, but seeing your family enjoy their meal makes it all worthwhile. Other times the sea is calm and the fish are plentiful. Maybe you'll take your axe to the nearest log and hack it into kindling. Maybe you'll mend your fishing nets or sharpen your tools. Maybe you'll do something fun like practice your throwing axe skills or play a drinking game with your friends. If you're lucky, one of your neighbors will have a fiddle and you can dance the night away under the stars. The work is hard, but the reward is worth it. Nothing beats fresh fish, especially when you prepare it yourself. When you return to the village, the community will benefit from your catch. Share your bounty with your neighbors. After all, you never know when they'll need your help. Then there are your crops to think about. You've planted barley and vegetables, but they won't harvest themselves. After that, you need to check your traps and tend your animals. Only then can you head out to sea and hopefully catch something for your family to eat. From archaeological evidence, Viking Age burials often contain feasting scenes that show the importance of food and drink in their culture. Feasting wasn't just for special occasions either. It was part of everyday life for Vikings. Archaeologists have discovered animal bones with butchering marks, pottery with food residue, and even vomit remains in Viking latrines.
Ow.
These clues help us reconstruct what Vikings ate on a daily basis. In turf, thick layers of cut sod laid on top of a sturdy stone foundation. It has a low roof, thick with sod, that keeps the cold in as much as it keeps the weather out. Festivals, weddings, and funerals were common occurrences that disrupted the routine of daily life. During festivals, men would compete in athletic competitions such as wrestling, weightlifting, and javelin throwing. Women would perform dances and sing songs, and everyone would feast and drink. Funerals were solemn affairs, with the body being placed in a burial mound or a ship and then set adrift on the sea. The deceased were often buried with their weapons and belongings, and the ceremony was intended to ensure their safe passage to the afterlife. Weddings were joyous occasions with feasts, music, and dancing.
Ow.
The bride and groom would exchange vows, and the celebration could last for days. There is no chimney. The smoke from the hearth inside pours out the door and drifts away over the village. Mingling with the smells of brine, wool, and wood smoke, she will need to feed them all before she turns to the small plot of land outside the village where she grows vegetables, herbs, and flax. Life here is hard and short. Few will reach the age of 40, and even fewer will live to see 50. The winters are harsh and hungry. Storms can destroy your nets and kill your livestock. Wolves prowl the beach at night, looking for stray animals or anything else that's easy prey. Even the summer is no picnic. The days are long and hot. There is nothing worse than working a field all day with the sun beating down on your back. When the winter snows melt, the rivers rise and threaten to swallow the village whole. Disease, too, is a constant threat. People die of fever and flux, and sometimes entire villages succumb to mysterious sicknesses that sweep across the countryside. The fresh scent of pine and spruce hangs heavy in the air. As you approach the shore, the masts of fishing boats are already creaking in the wind. These sturdy vessels are the backbone of Viking life. They allow exploration, trade, and most importantly, survival. The sea provides protein and sustains your community. Life for women was undoubtedly harder than for men. They performed most of the labor, raised the children, gathered berries, caught fish alongside their partners. You will take this out later today to see what the waters have given you. But for now, it is time to attend to other matters. The needs of your community come first, and still found time to weave cloth and tend the fields. If you were lucky enough to have a loom, you would also produce wool and linen cloth. The girls would help as much as they could, tending animals and gathering fuel, while the boys tended the small garden patch outside. The longhouse and took care of the bees. Raids were rare and dangerous. Gold was heavy and hard to acquire, but food was necessary.
Yes.
Every single day, whether you were an elite warrior, a farmer, or a trader, you had to eat. And wherever there were people, there would be someone to get that food from. That's why I like to explore the everyday lives of ordinary Vikings, because it gives us a glimpse of what life was like for the vast majority of people in the past. Those who didn't achieve fame or fortune, but who simply tried to make it through one more season, so they could try again to make it through the next. So let's go back to that fishing village and see if we can survive one more day. It's time to get up now. The first light is filtering through the cracks in the wall, but no one else is moving yet. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, the village comes alive. The sound of hammers rings as men repair ships, the shouts of children at play. The bleating of sheep and the smell of roasting meat on a spit drift across the settlement. Most Vikings lived along the coast, and most coastal communities were fishing villages. Many Vikings farmed as well, raising livestock and growing barley and oats. In this virtual world, we have based our Viking on a combination of historical records, archaeological evidence, and even modern genetic studies. Our Viking might look like a ferocious fighter, but when push comes to shove, their life is a lot like yours. Work fills their days, chores fill their nights, and the only real luxury is knowing that tomorrow they'll probably survive another day. We designed this game to put you in the shoes of an ordinary Viking living in an 870 AD fishing village. Your job is simple: stay alive. Do that long enough, and eventually you'll get good at it. Then you can start thinking about other things, like maybe getting rich or becoming famous. But don't worry too much about that. You are not alone. In fact, you live in a community of over 200 people. The ocean is your livelihood, but it does not care for your comfort. It lashes at your boat, bites your fingers, and swallows the unwary. You have a small boat that you use for fishing. Its shallow draft allows it to navigate the rocky coastline and venture into the open sea. Raiding is a dangerous but profitable way to boost your wealth and prestige. Back in the village, you have many tasks to complete before you head out to sea. First, you must collect firewood. Life as a Viking was rarely dull. The open sea is unforgiving. Storms can arise without warning, tossing your boat about like a leaf in a gale. Back on land, the aroma of roasted meat mingles with the smell of wood smoke. It's time for a hearty meal. After dinner, you have some free time before it's time to tend your sheep. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. From the frozen fjords to sun-drenched shores, we find ourselves transported to the heart of Viking lore. Now let us drift into another life, one not of fishing, but of fire and poetry. Picture a landscape untamed, mirroring the spirit of its people. It's a world where clan rivalries ran deeper than the ocean-s trench, and where the air crackled with the potential for violence. Here Eglo found a stage to showcase his multifaceted talents. He moved to the Kingdom of Northumbria in England, where he became a thane to King Ethelstan. Now, the term thane doesn't just denote a title. It signifies a bond, a connection of loyalty and service. To be a thane was to be part of the king's inner circle, a trusted advisor and a frontline warrior. As the sagas tell it, Egil's time in Norway was marred by conflict. He fell into a deep feud with a fellow Viking named Haralv Kraki, a rivalry that cast a dark cloud over his otherwise illustrious career. It It was a clash of wills, a storm of swords that shook the very foundations of Egil's life. When King Louis's brother, Charles the Simple, seized the throne, Egil's loyalty to the ousted monarch became a liability. He was a living testament to the wider world, a world that lay beyond the familiar shores of his homeland. Yet, despite his worldly experiences, Egil was still an Icelander at heart. He purchased land and livestock, settling down to the rhythms of life in the Icelandic countryside. The atmosphere would have been electric with the buzz of courtiers, the clink of glasses, and the murmur of political intrigue. The sagas tell us that he composed poems celebrating victories and lamenting defeats. Keeping alive the traditions of his people and honoring the fallen, Eric Bloodaxe's reign, once supported by Egil and his fellow Thanes, began to face opposition from within and without. The reasons for this are varied, ranging from Eric's own erratic behavior to external pressures from neighboring kingdoms. Scared as the stability of Eric's rule wavered, so did Egil's position in the kingdom. And death, they offer enough to paint a vivid picture of a man who remained true to his nature until the end. His life was a testament to the Viking ethos, a blend of brutality and brilliance, of warfare and poetry, of adventure and introspection. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious. He remains an enigmatic figure, a Viking warrior poet whose life spanned the halls of kings and the wild waves of the sea. He lived a life of adventure, poetry, and politics, a true embodiment of the Viking spirit. His story serves as a reminder that history is not just about battles and conquests, but about the lives and choices of the individuals who shaped it. The whispers of discontent grew louder, casting ominous shadows on Egil's future in York. His status as a Thane meant he was not just a guest in the kingdom. He was an integral part of its defense. As Egil settled into his new role, he would have trained with other Thanes, preparing for the battles that were sure to come. Iceland, the land of his birth, beckoned him back with a mixture of familiarity and challenge. Instead, he threw himself into the intricate web of local politics. It was a world he knew well, but had left behind for the grand stages of royal courts. Now, as he re-engaged with his roots, he brought with him the perspective of a seasoned traveler, a Viking who'd rubbed shoulders with kings and fought in battles far from home. The sagas tell us that Egil played an active role in local chieftains' assemblies, his voice carrying the weight of experience and his decisions demonstrating a keen understanding of power and responsibility. Returning home after years of adventure and royal service, Egil must have felt a sense of homecoming mixed with the weight of his past. The echoes of his adventures abroad were still fresh in the minds of his fellow Icelanders, shaping both their admiration for him and any expectations they might have had upon his return. Theirs was a brotherhood forged in fire and tested in the heat of combat. When the call to arms sounded, Egil stood shoulder to shoulder with his fellow Thanes, ready to defend the honor of the kingdom and his own personal code of loyalty. But even as he embraced the tranquility of his farm, the call of adventure was never far away. He led expeditions to the Faroe Islands and the Isle of Man, extending his influence and his reputation. With each passing year, Egil's status in Iceland grew, solidifying his legacy as a true son of the land. Betrayed by the very king he'd pledged to serve, Egil was once again forced into exile, driven from the kingdom he'd briefly called home. With his head held high and his resolve firm, he sailed back to Iceland, carrying with him not just tales of his adventures, but the seeds of change. The prospect of joining the royal court of York, of aligning himself with a king of such renown, was tempting. But the decision was not an easy one. Egil was settled in Iceland. He had responsibilities, ties to the land, and to the people that made leaving a daunting prospect. The call of duty and loyalty ultimately outweighed his desire for stability. So Egil, the Viking warrior poet, packed his bags, not with provisions for a trading voyage, but with the tools of his new trade, his sword and his shield, ready to defend his new king. The reasons behind the feud remained shrouded in mystery. Perhaps a disagreement over land, honor, or simply a difference too great to reconcile. But its impact on Egil was profound. Forced into exile once more, Egil was driven away from the only home he'd ever known. But it was his poetry that truly set him apart, offering a glimpse into the heart and mind of a Viking grappling with the complexities of existence. It was a heavy price to pay for a Viking of his stature, a man who'd tasted both the sweetness of victory and the bitterness of defeat. Egil, with his proven skills and unwavering spirit, would have fit right into this elite band of Northumbrian warriors. Setting sail, he reached the kingdom of the Franks, in what is now France. The tales of his deeds inspired verses that celebrated his courage and his cunning, ensuring that his name echoed not just in the halls of warriors, but in the hearts of bards as well. Egil, the Viking warrior poet, thrived in the courts of kings, finding favor and fortune under the banners of the great. Yet the winds of fate shifted once more, and Egil found himself caught in a storm of royal intrigue. Here he found another king in need of valiant warriors, Louis d'Outremer, the last king of the Carolingian dynasty. Egil joined Louis's army as a thane, marking another chapter in his saga. Under Louis, Egil would have participated in numerous campaigns across France and the Low Countries, facing foes who were as diverse as the landscapes they inhabited. From the wooded hills of northern France to the flatlands of the Low Countries, Egil's sword arm would have seen action against a variety of enemies. These could range from other ambitious nobles within the Frankish kingdom to external threats from neighboring powers. Imagine Egil standing shoulder to shoulder with King Ethelstan, their shields locked in a tight formation as they charged into battle against the forces of Anlaf Sitrickson. Ethelstan's victory at the Battle of Brunanburh in 937 was a testament to the strength of Egil and his fellow Viking allies. In the annals of history, their names were etched together, a reminder of a shared valor. But as the saying goes, every good thing must come to an end. We can imagine him in the bustling marketplaces of Dublin, his booming laughter echoing over the crowd as he traded tales and traded wares. For Vikings were not just ferocious fighters, they were also shrewd merchants, comfortable navigating the complexities of trade as they were the open seas. Harold Bluetooth was a legendary Viking leader, a unifier of warring clans, who aspired to extend his dominion across Scandinavia. Egil, with his reputation for skill in battle and poetry, would have been a valuable asset to such an ambitious ruler. Imagine Egil sitting in the grand hall of a Viking longhouse, the flickering firelight dancing in his intense eyes as he recited his poems. The hall was silent, captivated by his every word, hanging on to each syllable. His verses weren't just songs of war and valor. They were a reflection of a soul grappling with life's complexities. They spoke of love and loss, joy and sorrow, of the human condition laid bare. This was Egil not as a warrior, but as a poet, revealing a depth and sensitivity that belied his fierce exterior. Egil's charisma would have been an asset here, helping him form alliances and make deals that benefited him and his clan. Into this crucible was born Egil, the son of Skallagrim, a chieftain whose bloodline was a blend of Norwegian settlers and the indigenous Icelanders. This mix was typical of the age, a melting pot of cultures on an island forged by fire and ice. Perhaps he grew restless with the confines of courtly life, or maybe his adventurous spirit beckoned him to distant shores. Whatever the reason, he left, taking with him the memories of camaraderie and conquest. Young Egil didn't just inherit his father's lineage, he absorbed his fiery spirit. Stories tell of a childhood marked by intensity, a foreshadowing of the tempestuous life that lay ahead. When Egil was just 7 years old, a tale unfolded that chilled many a listener and set tongues wagging across the land. According to the sagas, Egil, playing with other children, picked up an axe and dealt a fatal blow to a companion. The boy died instantly, a casualty of a game taken too far. Such tales, though chilling, are often exaggerated in the sagas, aiming to paint a vivid picture of Egil's indomitable spirit, whether real or embellished. This story served to brand Egil with a reputation that stuck through his lifetime, a reputation for being violent, unpredictable. Egil was born around the year 904 in Iceland. As he matured, so did his ambitions, leading him to seek opportunities beyond the familiar shores. His journey out of Iceland was likely motivated by a combination of factors, all common in Viking culture. Perhaps he sought new lands to plunder, driven by the desire for wealth and glory. Or maybe he was fleeing the consequences of his violent reputation, seeking refuge in the vastness of the sea. Whatever his motivation, his departure marked the beginning of a saga filled with adventure, exile, and bitter travels. Da-da-da-da, a name that echoes through history like the clang of a sword or the murmur of a bard. Da-da. His saga, though rich with adventure, is a tapestry woven with threads of brutality and brilliance. Born into a world where honor and violence were two sides of the same coin, Eagle was a product of his time. Yet he stands out even in that heady mix of warfare and wordplay. Let's explore the saga of this remarkable Viking. To truly understand Egil, one must first peer into the heart of Iceland around the year 900 AD. But the icy waters of Iceland couldn't contain Egil's fiery spirit forever. Egil's first stop was the Kingdom of Dublin in Ireland, a place where Norsemen had established a significant presence. But it wasn't long before Egil felt the pull of the open road again. The reasons behind Egil's departure from Northumbria are lost to the mists of time. It was in Norway under King Harald Bluetooth's banner that Egil truly came into his own. Yet the warrior poet's path was not without its shadows. With his heart heavy and his sword at the ready, he embarked on a journey that took him far beyond the familiar landscapes of his youth. But while Egil excelled in battle, his reputation as a poet continued to grow. In the turbulent world of Viking politics, loyalty was a currency as valuable as gold, and just as corruptible. When Egil returned to Iceland, he brought with him the echoes of distant battles and the whispers of royal courts. As Egil journeyed through life, his actions were guided by a profound sense of honor and a fierce determination to protect his kin. The news of King Eric Bloodaxe's invitation to become a thane reached Egil in the peaceful realm of his Icelandic farm. Upon arriving at the court of York, Egil would have been met with a flurry of activity. Yet even in the midst of these duties, Egil's poetic side did not wane. In the tumultuous world of Viking politics, where alliances were as fragile as they were numerous, the seeds of discord were sown. In this climate of uncertainty, Egil made a fateful decision to return to his homeland. Back in Iceland, Egil did not retreat into the quiet life. Though the sagas do not provide many details about Egil's later life, Egil's saga is a saga of a man who lived on the edge of a sword, both wielding it and writing about it. If you want to learn about the fierce women of the Viking Age, then check out this video. Let us now shift to a quieter place, a burial mound in what is now Norway. The year is around 834. Beneath the earth, carefully placed and richly adorned, they were laid to rest in a magnificent oak ship, 21 meters long, carved with curling dragon heads and intricate patterns. With them were grave goods, fine textiles, wooden carts, carved animal heads, tools, buckets, and even a small bed. Underneath lay a massive burial ship pointing its prow towards the sunrise. This interpretation is further supported by the presence of a queen's headdress found nearby, hinting at a high social status. Unfortunately, the lack of written records from the Viking Age leaves us without definitive answers. However, the very fact that two women of such high status were buried together suggests a deep bond between them. The ship itself was a masterpiece of woodworking, crafted with such precision that some parts could still move after more than 1,000 years. Measuring 180 feet in diameter and 33 feet high, it dwarfs the burial mounds of lesser individuals. This grand scale reflects the status of those interred within, showcasing the immense effort and resources dedicated to their final send-off. The cold Norwegian climate and the ceiling of the ship beneath the burial mound protected its contents, allowing for the survival of organic materials like textiles, wood, and even food remains. This exceptional preservation has provided an unparalleled glimpse into Viking culture, allowing researchers to reconstruct daily life, religious beliefs, and burial practices with astonishing detail. Its construction was so advanced that it was not meant to be sailed. Analysis of the textiles has traced the origins of the silk used in the burial shrouds, linking the Vikings to far-reaching trade networks and cultural exchanges across Europe and Asia. Others argue that they were members of a wealthy family, buried in accordance with their status and importance. The Oseberg ship serves as a poignant reminder of the gaps in our knowledge and the need for interdisciplinary approaches that incorporate archaeology, history, folklore, and mythology to piece together the rich tapestry of the past. The ship's intricate carvings and majestic presence have become iconic symbols of the Viking Age, transcending their historical context and resonating with modern audiences. It challenges stereotypes and invites us to see Vikings not just as ferocious warriors, but as seafaring explorers, skilled craftsmen, and deeply religious individuals. Your curiosity fuels our journey through time. So keep exploring, Keep asking questions and let your thirst for knowledge guide us to even more extraordinary discoveries. The past is waiting to be uncovered. Let's continue to unearth its secrets, side by side. Preserved in the halls of the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, it continues to captivate visitors from around the world, inspiring awe and wonder at the legacy of this remarkable civilization. The ship was not merely a vessel, but a carefully designed architectural marvel, intended to transport the deceased on their final journey. The lack of written records from the Viking Age leaves scholars grappling with the identities of the two women and the meaning of the elaborate burial. Beneath the earth lies the Oseberg ship, a majestic vessel that whispers tales of a bygone era. And as the sun sets over the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, it is time for us to embark on a journey back in time and uncover the secrets held within this ancient mound. While the ship's architecture and grave goods provide clues, the absence of written accounts leaves room for multiple interpretations. Prepare to be captivated by the mysteries that lie ahead. Together, let us unravel the enigma of the Oseberg ship and discover the stories that have echoed through the ages. The adventure awaits. Are you ready to take the first step on this extraordinary journey? Let's explore the past and unravel the secrets of the Oseberg ship together. Its construction, burial, and the array of artifacts found within provide a unique window into the beliefs, status, and daily lives of Viking women during a pivotal period in history. In a time when the average lifespan was less than 35 years, she had lived an exceptionally long life. Her personal belongings, including combs made of walrus ivory, indicate a high status and a life of leisure. The younger woman's possessions were simpler, suggesting a different social standing. Yet both were treated with reverence and buried with dignity. Instead, it was designed to carry the deceased on their final voyage, symbolizing their journey to the afterlife. A symbol of journeying to the afterlife, it had been deliberately buried to keep its contents safe from grave robbers. What they found inside was beyond their wildest expectations. The ship was buried under a mound of earth and clay, creating a sealed chamber. The cold preserved much of what was inside. Who were these women? Their bones speak of age and illness and care. One was around 80 years old. At a time when many died young, she had lived long. Exquisite textiles, including a silk and wool mantle, point to connections with the Byzantine Empire and other parts of Europe. These fabrics were not just burial shrouds, but markers of wealth and influence. The presence of a four-poster bed indicates comfort and luxury, challenging the stereotypical image of Vikings as solely fierce warriors. Even the food remains, including a preserved loaf of bread and remnants of a feast, suggest a life of plenty and ritual. Her belongings suggest power and status. Scholars still debate their roles, priestesses of a cult perhaps, or matriarchs of a great house. The burial was not just about death, but about the continuity of belief, of legacy, of reverence. What we know in fragments. Threads of cloth, the curve of a carving, a buckle, the tiniest of pins, even a single tooth. But from these fragments, a story emerges. One of respect, ritual, and the quiet power that shaped Viking life in ways raiding never could. Lies a ship. Not just any ship, but an extraordinary vessel that has captured the imaginations of archaeologists and historians alike. The Oseberg ship. Buried at a time when Viking Age Norway was transitioning from a society marked by raids and exploration to one increasingly focused on farming and trading, it offered an extraordinary glimpse into the beliefs and practices of a people often remembered primarily for their ferocity. It is the largest and most ornate ship ever found in Scandinavia from this period, providing unparalleled insights into Viking craftsmanship, cosmology, and funerary rites. Unlike most Viking burials, this one held two women. Their exact identities remain unknown. Perhaps they were queens or priestesses, perhaps both. The discovery of the Oseberg ship in 1904 was nothing short of spectacular. When Einar Thorvaldsen and his team uncovered the mound near the Oslofjord, they knew they had hit upon something significant. Amongst the treasures within the ship was a wooden panel depicting a boat with outriggers, suggesting that these women may have been associated with the sea, possibly as seafarers or even queens. But why were there two women? Were they sisters, mother and daughter, or perhaps lovers? The grave goods offer tantalizing clues to their lives and status. One of the women was older, estimated to have been around 80 years old when she died. The burial mound itself is a testament to the importance of the ritual. As researchers delved deeper into the mysteries of the Oseberg ship, they uncovered evidence of a previously unknown type of Viking Age burial. The preservation of the Oseberg ship is nothing short of miraculous. For instance, the discovery of plant remains within the ship has revealed the types of flowers used in funeral rituals. Shedding light on the importance of nature and the seasons in Viking culture, the Oseberg ship's impact extends beyond the realm of archaeology. It has inspired works of art, literature, and film, capturing the imagination of audiences worldwide. Yet despite its fame, the Oseberg ship continues to pose many questions. Some researchers have speculated that the two women were priestesses of a cult, buried with their most prized possession, a ship that symbolized their connection to the gods. The ongoing debate surrounding the identity of the women reflects the broader challenges of understanding Viking culture, which relied heavily on oral traditions that were not preserved in writing. Today, the Oseberg ship stands as a testament to the ingenuity, artistry, and cultural complexity of the Viking people. In the heart of Norway, nestled amidst rolling hills and serene waters, lies a humble burial mound that conceals a secret of epic proportions. Join us as we delve into the depths of Norse mythology and uncover the legends that surround the Oseberg ship. And if you find yourself enraptured by tales of ancient mysteries and archaeological marvels, don't forget to stay tuned for more captivating stories. The year is 985 AD. The place is a Viking longhouse in Norway. It's crowded with warriors and courtiers who've come to pay homage to a local jarl. A fire crackles in a long pit down the center of the room. "Another drink," he roars, holding out an empty horn. "Killed 3 men last week, just because they looked at him funny." Just then, a beautiful woman enters the hall, carrying a heavy wooden mug. All eyes turn to her, including yours. She smiles and raises the mug. He, too, walks to the center of the hall and taps his mug on the table. "Silence," he says, "so I may tell you a story. How will you travel to Uppsala? What gifts will you bring to impress the Jarls?" And if you enjoyed this experience, please consider supporting us through a membership platform. Thanks for watching. What kind of warrior will you enter into the war games? Who will you meet there? Will you make allies or enemies? Will you return home with riches and glory? Or will you die in combat or worse? From the plague? Only time will tell. You recognize him now as the man whose name was called just before you entered the hall. You remember thinking he looked important. Now you know it's true. He is the Jarl, Einar, host of this gathering. With a flick of his wrist, he sends his mug flying through the air. It lands perfectly upright on the edge of the table. "Did you see?" he asks the room. "Like a raven on a craggy stone?" People nod, impressed. "Good," the Jarl says. "Then listen closely to what I have to say. For the past 2 years, our people have lived under the shadow of disease and death. But the gods have smiled upon us again, and we can feel the warmth of the sun on our faces. The time has come to repay our debts to the gods. Our first care is the building of a new temple in Uppsala. We will gather there at the summer solstice and sacrifice to the Allfather. Each of you will bring what you can, silver, grain, or a slave for sacrifice. This will be a festival like none other. The Jarls of Lade and Hordaland will join us. There will be feasting and drinking and music, and most importantly, there will be war games. Champions from all over the north will compete, and the prizes will be worth their weight in gold." The Earl pauses, savoring the anticipation. "So mark the date on your calendars. The festival will begin when the sun is at its zenith, and will continue until the moon is full. Anyone who does not attend the festival at Uppsala will be considered a traitor. To the guests of our hall," she says, her voice echoing in the vast space. Through a crack in the wall, you can see a few warriors practicing with blunt swords. Outside, children are playing and dogs barking. For a moment, you're glad to be alive, to feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, to smell the fresh air in your lungs. But then you remember the previous evening's festivities, and your heart sinks. In the distance, you hear the shrill blast of a horn. You need to leave today, you realize, and quickly. If you want to avoid the Earl's all too keen eye, you scramble out of bed and throw on some clothes. Decide to wait until the others are asleep again before you sneak out of town. Later that day, you find yourself sitting alone in the longship. You watch the shore recede into the distance, taking with it the memory of flickering firelight, raucous laughter, and the haunting strains of a mournful harp. May your stay be long and your pockets deep. Then she begins to pour. The room is silent for a moment as she ladles out the first mugs of ale. Thanks to our guests, she continues, for bringing new stories and new songs to our ears. Finally, she turns away and heads back toward the kitchen. Who is she? You ask Orm. He leans in conspiratorially and says, "That is Astrid, daughter of the Jarl. If you wish to climb the ladder in this hall, she is the way, though I hear she has a sharp tongue and an even sharper sword."
Hesitate.
Unsure if you want to make an enemy of such a powerful man, suddenly, one of the warriors at the far end of the hall stands up. Everyone falls silent, and he strides toward the center of the room. "Brothers and sisters," he begins, and you can hear the quiet confidence in his voice. "It is time for a song." He pulls a small harp from behind a pillar and sits down on a nearby bench. Then he begins to sing, playing the harp with nimble fingers. His song is sad, and many in the audience weep, especially the women. Even the big man, Bjorn, seems moved by the melody. As the song ends, applause breaks out, and the warrior bows deeply. "Thank you," he says, "but I am no musician. I am only Leif, son of a poor farmer. And this song," he adds quietly, "is my country's lament for those lost to the great sickness that came last winter." You feel a pang of sympathy for the poor farmer's son, and you applaud again, this time even louder. Maybe it's the mead, you think, or maybe you genuinely feel sorry for the boy. But before you can decide what to do, Orm grabs the horn and fills it with mead. "Drink up, little brother," he shouts to the big man, "and tell us about your deeds." The big man takes the horn and drains it. "You honor me," he says, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I am Bjorn, son of a famous Jarl, and these Franks owe me much gold." As he speaks, he notices your strange clothes and exotic weapons. "And who might you be?" he asks suspiciously. "A traveler from afar," you reply, hoping he won't ask any more questions. But Bjorn isn't finished with you yet. "What? Are you a warrior?" he demands. You think about telling him that you are one of the finest swordsmen in the world, but instead you play along. "I have fought," you say cryptically. Bjorn isn't convinced. But he doesn't press you further, and after a moment he returns to his companions. Smoke curls upward through a hole in the roof. The air smells of roasted meat, pine resin, and wet wool. You sit among them on a bench, sharing a cup of mead with your new companion, a wiry young man named Orm. He tells you stories always louder than the last of his recent exploits. Fighting in the Frankish Empire under a man called Richard. Richard, he says, is a good leader, though a bit too fond of wearing silk pajamas. Makes him look ridiculous when he leads his troops into battle. That must be true, you say. But you not really listening, because across the room you see a huge man with a braided beard down to his knees. He is laughing loudly, slapping his thigh and knocking over a stool. His companions are trying to quiet him, but so far without success. A short while later, the big man approaches you and Orm, and you hear his booming laugh echo around the pillars that support the roof, while Orm lets out a breath and whispers to you that was pretty close. He loves to pick fights. And don't get on his bad side. The feast continues late into the night. Soon the mood has become noticeably looser. Men slap each other on the back, spilling their drinks and boasting loudly of their accomplishments. After another round of drinking and eating, a tall, thin man with a pointed beard rises from his seat. The next morning, you awake to the sound of bleating sheep. As the wind fills your sails, you turn your thoughts to the future. Will you attend the festival at Uppsala? Will you sacrifice a slave? This has been a short from Nordland. To learn more about Viking history, visit our channel. Now, as our journey draws to a close, let your thoughts drift back over the sea. From the fishing village where fingers never thawed, to the stormy mind of a poet warrior, to the quiet tomb of two women remembered in wood and silk, and finally, to the firelit halls where power flickered like torchlight. Viking life was not just conquest. It was routine, suffering, ceremony, story. As you lie in warmth and stillness, consider how different the world was, and yet how much the same. People waking to labor, mourning their dead, honoring their leaders, seeking meaning in the cold. May the echoes of oars, poems and quiet feasts lull you gently into rest.
Good night.
Welcome tonight. Allow yourself to sink gently into the stillness of another time, a different rhythm. Let the distractions of your world drift away as we turn our gaze to a mountain cloaked in cedar mist, where bells chime softly through the dawn and robes rustle like whispers. We are headed to medieval Japan, not the world of samurai and swordplay. No, we'll explore the hidden spaces, the echoing silence of temple corridors. The calligraphy brushed beneath lantern light, the soft sound of rice falling into a wooden bowl. Through long hours, quiet rituals, and the restrained elegance of the Heian court, we'll travel through the lives of monks, visionaries, and nobles. Let us begin not with clashing steel, but with the strike of a wooden clapper. Welcome to the series. Today we are going to talk about what it would be like to live in a Japanese monastery in the year 1100. To get the most out of this video, I recommend that you close your eyes while listening. The air is still and cold, and your breath forms soft clouds as you unfold your legs from sleep. Your head is freshly shaven. Your robes, simple and coarse, are wrapped around your body in layers to keep out the morning chill. But it was until the 9th century that we see the emergence of monastic institutions that even begin to resemble those of medieval Europe. Thus, the journey to the monastery is a difficult one. In 1119, a traveler recorded his visit to Mount Koya. After 7 days of intense training, visitors would receive a certificate of completion, a white staff to mark their status as a trained monk, and then be allowed to leave. Seated meditation involved sitting cross-legged in a prescribed posture and focusing one's thoughts on the breath. Startled, the visitor unconsciously shifted his position, and the monk promptly berated him for doing so. But eventually, he got the hang of it and was able to eat the same gruel that the other monks ate 3 times a day. In spite of the harsh treatment, our visitor gradually begins to find some measure of peace, he writes. When I failed to understand the right way of doing things, I became angry. He called this work the true aspect of all living beings. In it, Genshin wrote, "All people who have eyes can see, but how many really see?" In fact, it was an intense boot camp for anyone who dared to enter. In some ways, it was no different from a military barracks. The monks were rigorously disciplined. Their days were packed full, and their nights were filled with the rustlings of doubt. Yet in the midst of this turmoil, there existed a quiet dignity. The monks had stripped themselves of all but the essentials, and were free from the constraints of social convention. They were judged not by their social status or wealth, but by their character and piety. Theirs was a life of simplicity and dedication, and it offered a compelling vision of the possibilities for human existence. All people who have ears can hear, but how many really hear? Since birth, we have lived without truly seeing anything or hearing anything. Therefore, everything we see and hear is the same. Why is it that we cannot see the true aspects of all living beings? Genshin argued that the reason we fail to see the true nature of all living beings is because of our own selfish tendencies. We always judge others by ourselves and thus misunderstand them. Genshin argues that we should look inward and examine our own motivations and biases, rather than judging others by external standards. Using this method, we can learn to see all living beings in their true light and treat them accordingly. Genshin's work was immensely popular and went through numerous printings in the centuries after it was written. And when I was angry, I suffered, so I did not know whether it was better to be stupid or to be angry. For example, in a letter that he wrote after returning home, he complains that he can't read secular books, saying, "What use are these volumes of poetry and essays if they lead to the dust of delusion? I can't read them even if I want to." He goes on to explain that he has recently come to understand that the joys of the material world are but delusions, saying, "We foolish mortals are like those who mistake a dream for reality. Thinking it to be the real thing, we pine for what we think we ought to possess. We are like a man who chases after butterflies in a dream, catching one butterfly and losing another. If we are to abandon the two views of desire and aversion, it would seem that we need not worry even about what is to come." However, I soon realized that both anger and stupidity were suffering. So I let myself be guided by the teaching, "Do nothing, say nothing." With that, I forgot both anger and stupidity and had no more suffering. Then he was sent back to the dormitory to wait for his turn to meditate once more, he writes. It seemed to me that my mind was clearer than it had ever been. In particular, monasteries were instrumental in preserving Chinese texts. After the Mongol armies destroyed most of the books in the Great Library of Tang Dynasty China, the work of translating these texts from Chinese into Japanese was taken up by Buddhist monks, who copied text by hand onto sheets of paper made from hemp. While copying the text, monks would memorize the contents of the book, and upon finishing a book would recite it aloud to another monk, who would quiz them on the contents. Thus, in addition to producing a faithful copy of the original, the translation process allowed the monks to absorb the meaning and intent of the original text. Eventually, the translations produced by the monks were checked against the originals, and the process began anew. The result was an extraordinary flowering of Buddhist literature in medieval Japan. For example, the Tendai monk Seiko, who founded the Tendai school of Buddhism, is credited with writing the Yoshide Gaku, a comprehensive study of Tendai doctrines that was based on his lectures. The work would become a fundamental text in the history of Japanese Buddhism. I felt that it would be easy to deal with whatever situation might arise. I thought, is it possible that this is what it means to be a Buddha? Again and again, he meditated, and again, he was scolded. Our visitor records that he was meditating, perhaps 10 times that night, and each time he heard a sound or felt a bug crawl over his leg or shoulder. He was chastised by the supervising monk. Imagine that, 10 times. He reports that he wanted to throw himself into an abyss, but was unable to do so. Finally, just before dawn, the supervising monk approached him and asked him how many times he thought he had meditated. When our visitor replied, "I have lost count," the monk simply said, "You must start again," and pushed him back to his cushion. Although zazen, or seated meditation, had been practiced in Japan since the 6th century, it was the Rinzai school of Zen Buddhism that developed it into the rigorous practice that we associate with the image of the Stoic Buddhist monk today. After meditation came a morning session of reciting Buddhist scriptures, after which the monks would sweep the temple grounds or tend the herb and vegetable gardens that supplied the kitchens with food. At midday, the monks would gather to chant sutras for the dead and to pray for the living. After lunch, the monks would copy sutras or engage in manual labor, such as weaving straw sandals or repairing the buildings on the monastery complex. Evenings were spent reciting sutras and in zazen. The entire routine was designed to foster mindfulness, patience, humility, and detachment from worldly concerns. It took him 2 days of arduous travel to arrive at the mountain gate. He writes, "The path was very rugged and precipitous. One slip might mean a fall of several thousand feet, yet there were many dangerous places like this, and I traversed them all with only my 2 hands and feet. Now I am old, and my hair is gray. If I were young again, I would be a mountain monk." Monasticism in medieval Japan took on its own character, shaped by local culture and circumstances. In fact, the Japanese monastery was often the center of a small community that relied upon the good offices of the resident monks for mediating with the gods and the dead on behalf of the local populace. Monasteries also functioned as educational centers and as storehouses of knowledge for the societies they served. The largest and wealthiest of these were the provincial monasteries, like the Tosa Gakuen on Mount Koya, which housed several hundred monks, along with a large number of lay employees and dependents. There is no fire waiting, no breakfast laid. First comes zazen-seated meditation. You kneel on a flat cushion in the main hall, the staff, and then be shaved bald except for a single tuft of hair on the top of their head. That final tuft of hair was allowed so that the wearer could use the rest of his hair as a towel. Male visitors would also have their balls tied off and removed so that they would be less distracted by sexual urges while in the course of their spiritual training. Visitors were expected to follow a strict code of conduct, including not eating meat, not killing animals, not stealing, not lying, not drinking alcohol, and not having sex. Interestingly, although the last 3 are considered the 5 great vices in medieval Christianity, they were seen as particularly important in the context of the Buddhist monastery, because they were considered the temptations that lay practitioners were most likely to face. The floor is polished wood worn smooth by generations of monks who sat here before you. Outside, crows caw faintly from cedar branches. Inside, the silence is total. Your knees ache. Minutes pass like hours. You are told to return to your breath, to empty your mind. But the pain is loud and the cold. and the memory of a warm meal long distant. Finally, you are dismissed. Breakfast is a bowl of plain rice, a few pickled vegetables, and hot water called oka. You eat in silence. Your bowl is washed with more hot water, and drunk nothing is wasted. The rest of the day is a rhythm of chants, sweeping paths, copying sutras, and tending to small gardens that cling to the edges of the mountain. There is no discussion, no leisure, only repetition. And yet within this repetition lies purpose. The rhythm of their lives, gentle, measured, unrelenting, was meant to wear away the ego, like water shaping stone. This is what it was to live in a Japanese monastery in the year 1100. Not peace exactly, but a quiet, persistent endurance. And if you're able, set aside any distractions and try to imagine yourself in the following scenario. Imagine yourself rising before the first touch of daylight, roused by the sharp knock of a wooden hilshigi clapper echoing across the temple grounds. Now open your eyes. Welcome back. How did you feel during that exercise? I certainly hope that you didn't experience the full force of a Japanese winter. But maybe you felt something of the stillness, and the repetitive tasks, and the lack of personal ambition. Maybe you experienced a little of what life was like for the monks of the Tosa Gakuen monasteries. The Tendai and Shingon schools had been importing Buddhist ideas from China since the 8th century. Monasteries were built high up in the mountains in order to be closer to the heavens, or at least far from the distractions of human society. Upon arrival at the monastery, visitors would be given a set of rough homespun robes, a straw sandal. After being fitted with robes, shaved and processed, visitors would take part in a 7-day course of intensive training that involved chanting, copying sutras, meditating, and performing menial tasks. Daily life at the monastery was rigidly regimented. As our visitor will discover, the day began at 3:30 a.m. with a 2-hour session of zazen or seated meditation. Our visitor's first zazen lesson was interrupted by a sudden shout from the monk, who was supervising their meditation. At first, meals were an ordeal. Our visitor records that he constantly spilled his rice and soup and found it impossible to use chopsticks properly. Eventually, his training is complete, and our visitor is given a white staff and permitted to return home. In addition to serving as a place of spiritual training and as a community resource, the monastery also served as a center of scholarship. In the mid-12th century, a monk named Genshin compiled a collection of Buddhist teachings intended to provide guidance to lay people on how to live their lives according to Buddhist principles, in spite of the relative peace that he achieved during his stay at the monastery. Our visitor was not immune to the limitations placed on lay people by medieval Japanese Buddhism. As we've already discussed, the medieval Japanese monastery was not a peaceful retreat from the turmoil of the world. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. In the depths of an ancient Japanese forest, amidst towering cedar trees that have stood the test of time, there exists a sanctuary. It's a place of tranquility where history whispers through the ages. The air here is thick with the scent of incense, and the soft murmur of prayers creates a symphony of devotion. The rhythmic chanting of monks echoes his teachings, while the intricate details of temple architecture speak to his profound influence on Japanese Buddhism. Here, amidst the serene landscapes, a boy named Keikei was born. The Tang dynasty was renowned for its intellectual prowess and esoteric Buddhist teachings. At that time, Japan was in its early medieval period known as the Nara period, and Buddhism was still finding its footing. While the Tendai school had emerged under the leadership of Saiko, its teachings were more aligned with the Yogacara school of Indian Buddhism. He was captivated by the broader spectrum of Buddhist philosophy and scripture. He carried with him a wealth of knowledge and experiences that would forever change the course of Japanese Buddhism. Upon his arrival, he found that Buddhism in Japan was still in its nascent stages. Lacking the depth and esoteric practices he had discovered in China, he was a trusted advisor to emperors, often called upon to offer counsel on matters of state. Among them was a young woman named Anrakuyo, who would later become known as the nun Mekyu. Some accounts suggest that he entered a state of deep meditation known as samadhi, from which he has not yet emerged. His contributions to Buddhism, calligraphy, poetry, and language have left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape of Japan. But perhaps his greatest gift was the introduction of esoteric Buddhism to Japanese soil. First, Please click the like button if you've enjoyed our journey through the life of KK. And second, share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback means the world to me and inspires me to keep bringing you these enriching stories. Thank you for joining me on this enlightening journey. May the wisdom of the past illuminate your path today, by bringing the teachings of mantra, mudra, and mandala to new heights. KK opened up a deeper understanding of Buddhism, one that continues to resonate with people across generations. The monks of Mount Kia believe that KK is still in that meditative state, awaiting the time when he will manifest as the second coming of the historical Buddha. Walk among the ancient cedar trees, feel the tranquility of the temple gardens, and witness the vibrant rituals that have been preserved for centuries. In the heart of this monastic complex lies the tomb of KK. Although the exact location is kept secret from the public, the energy of his presence can still be felt. It is said that those who visit his tomb with pure intentions may receive his blessings and guidance. Rather than being seen as a historical figure who lived and died, KK is viewed as an eternal presence, existing beyond the limitations of time and space. This belief is exemplified by the central figure of the Hongu, a sacred object enshrined in the main temple of Mount Kia. Instead of a physical relic, the Hongu houses a symbolic representation of KK's body, known as the Zetai Shintai. This ethereal form serves as a reminder of his continuous presence within the monastery and the living embodiment of his teachings. When she first encountered KK's teachings, her life was filled with turmoil and uncertainty. But under his guidance, she found solace and a sense of purpose. KK recognized the depth of her spiritual yearning and took her under his wing, providing her with special teachings and entrusting her with important tasks. Their bond went beyond teacher and student. They shared a deep mutual respect and affection, and together they worked tirelessly to spread the teachings of esoteric Buddhism. His wisdom and insight were highly valued, and he was respected not only as a religious figure, but also as a sage. Over time, his teachings took root and flourished. Monasteries dedicated to the Shingon school of Buddhism sprang up across Japan, each becoming a sanctuary for those seeking spiritual refuge. The monks he trained became renowned for their scholarship and their ability to heal and guide others. With the support of the imperial court, he established a center of esoteric Buddhism on Mount Kia, a sacred mountain shrouded in legend. Here he taught the principles he had learned from his Chinese teachers, introducing concepts like mantra, mudra, and mandala to the Japanese soil. He engaged in lively discussions with fellow scholars, challenging conventional ideas and seeking deeper insights. His inquisitive nature and sharp intellect made him a formidable debater, and his peers soon recognized him as a rising star among the scholars. During his time in China, KK didn't limit himself to the confines of monasteries and scriptures. He ventured into the world, observing the lives of ordinary people and contemplating their joys and sorrows. This immersion in human experience enriched his understanding of suffering and the potential for enlightenment that resided within every individual. It was during this transformative journey that the name Kobo Daishi came into being. It was a title bestowed upon him by his Chinese teachers in recognition of his exceptional qualities. They saw in him a great teacher, someone who possessed not only profound knowledge, but also the compassion to guide others on the path to enlightenment. The name stuck, and when he returned to Japan, he would be known as Kobo Daishi, a beacon of wisdom for those seeking spiritual liberation. However, KK felt drawn to a different path, one that delved deeper into the mysteries of Buddhism. He longed to explore the esoteric traditions that promised a more profound understanding of the universe and the nature of reality. The mystery of sound, embodied in the mantra, held the power to transform and enlighten. The mystery of gesture, represented by the mudra, revealed the interconnectedness of all things. And the mystery of form, depicted in the mandala, unveiled the true nature of reality. KK didn't confine his teachings to the realm of spirituality. He was a polymath whose interests spanned various disciplines. He made significant contributions to calligraphy, poetry, and even language. He played a pivotal role in standardizing the Japanese writing system, creating a phonetic syllabary known as the katana kana that greatly influenced the development of Japanese literature. His birth date, February 21st, holds a special significance, as it's the same day his soul would depart from this earthly realm. Yet KK, with unwavering determination, assembled a small crew and set sail for the distant land of China. He identified a lineage of esoteric Buddhist masters known as the Shangzong, which had been transmitting these ancient wisdoms for generations. With reverence and humility, KK became their student, eager to absorb the profound knowledge they shared. Under their guidance, he delved into the intricacies of mantra, mudra, and mandala, practices that formed the core of esoteric Buddhism. Mantra, the mystical power of sound; mudra, the symbolism of hand gestures; and mandala, the cosmic diagrams that mapped the universe. These teachings resonated deeply with KK's spiritual sensibilities, providing him with a framework to understand the hidden dimensions of reality. The journey was arduous, testing not only their resolve, but also the limits of human endurance. But for KK, the pursuit of greater wisdom was worth every hardship endured. From a young age, KK displayed an insatiable curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. He excelled in his studies, mastering not only Buddhist scriptures, but also Confucian texts and Chinese poetry. As he delved deeper into Buddhist teachings, he realized that something was amiss. The prevalent forms of Buddhism in Japan simply did not satisfy his spiritual aspirations. He sensed that there was more to this vast spiritual tradition, and that its true essence lay dormant, waiting to be rediscovered. But who was KK? What led him to embark on a solitary journey to China at the age of 33? And how did he leave an indelible mark on Japanese culture and spirituality? Join me as we unravel the enigma of KK, exploring his life, teachings, and the profound impact he had on shaping Japanese civilization. This is the sacred grounds of a monastery. Now let us turn from silence to vision, from the cold floors of the monastery to the vivid dreams of a single man. His name was Kake, but to many, he is known as Kobo Deshitha, great teacher. Born in 774, KK came of age during the Nara period, when Japan was still shaping its spiritual identity. He studied Confucian texts, Chinese poetry, and Buddhist scriptures. But he was restless, unsatisfied with the limited teachings around him. In his early 30s, he journeyed to China, perilous voyage across the sea. There he encountered esoteric Buddhism, or Mikyo, and studied under masters of the Tang dynasty. He returned to Japan with texts, rituals, and a vision. He founded the Shingon school of Buddhism, which emphasized mantra, mudra, and mandala sacred words, hand gestures, and cosmic diagrams. He settled on Mount Kia, establishing a temple that still stands today. KK wrote extensively, not just on spiritual matters, but on education, calligraphy, and language. He even devised one of the earliest Japanese syllabaries. His presence grew. Emperors sought his counsel. Monks emulated his path. And after death, he was not declared gone, but merely meditating eternally, awaiting the future Buddha. Kakai's story is one of deep searching and layered silence. In the rustle of robes, in the ink of his brush, he carved out a vision that reshaped Japanese spiritual life. The legacy of Kako resonates deeply within the walls of this monastery. Our journey back in time begins in the year 774 in a small village nestled in the mountains. Driven by an unquenchable thirst for enlightenment, KK made the momentous decision to seek his fortune in China, the birthplace of Buddhism. Embarking on such a journey was fraught with peril. The seas were treacherous, and the thought of venturing so far from the familiar shores of Japan filled many with trepidation. Upon arriving in China, he wasted no time in immersing himself in the rich tapestry of Chinese culture and esoteric Buddhist teachings. However, Kakai's thirst for knowledge extended beyond these esoteric practices. After years of intense study and contemplation, the time came for Kakai to return to Japan. Central to Kakai's teachings was the concept of the three mysteries, which encapsulated the essence of esoteric Buddhism. Kakai's influence wasn't limited to the spiritual sphere. As Kakai's reputation grew, so did the number of his disciples. According to historical records, KK passed away at the age of 80 in 835. However, the manner of his passing remains shrouded in mystery. KK's life and teachings have left an enduring legacy on Japanese culture and spirituality. If you find yourself journeying through Japan, I encourage you to visit the sacred grounds of Mount Koyasan. Before I let you go, I invite you to do two simple things. Temples are usually quiet, peaceful places, havens of calm, where you can get away from the chaos of the world and appreciate art and architecture in nature. And while they may look calm on the surface, that's not always the case. Sometimes there's been violence done within their walls, or violence has been done to them. It's over 50 feet tall and weighs about 500 tons. And it's so big that when construction was finished in 752, people came from all over East Asia to marvel at it. When the Fujiwara influence started to become too much, a new clan rose to challenge them. The Taira. Over several decades, they maneuvered themselves into key positions of power, including the imperial court, until finally, in 1162, they forced the last Fujiwara emperor to abdicate. The Taira now ruled Japan. But while they had won the war, the peace was shaky at best. The Taira already controlled the temple, and Koromori had ordered its protection at all costs. It's said that one monk named Jian continued to chant scriptures as flames licked at his robe, burning it and his body to ash. 2 years later, Yoshinaka defeated Koromori in the Battle of Yuji. Soon after, he retook Nara and rebuilt Todaji. But the damage ran deeper than wood and stone. Another monk reportedly hid scriptures under his sash and jumped into a vat of butter to save them. But of the scriptures it holds, the stories of its brave monks, or the peaceful garden that surrounds it. And now, we're bringing it to you for free. But we can't keep doing this without your help. Please consider supporting us. That's because we have the power to choose our narrative. Yes, this temple was burned to the ground in 1180, but it was also rebuilt. Yes, its halls were once filled with the screams of dying men, but they also rang with the chants of peaceful prayers. Yes, the great Buddha was damaged, but it still smiles serenely from its porch. We could focus on the darkness or the light, the loss or the hope, the war or the peace. But ultimately it's up to us to decide. These stories may be legend, but it's clear that the temple was saved only because its priests were willing to sacrifice everything. When Tomitsu realized this, he began making plans to take the temple by force. On March 21st, 1180, his men set fire to the temple complex. In the end, it didn't matter which side they chose. Other temples followed suit, but nothing was ever quite the same. Power, even when cloaked in prayer, invites danger. Even sacred halls are not immune to the winds of ambition. They were all called Sai warrior monks trained in both combat and religious studies, and they all lost. Their temple had been turned into a battleground, their brethren killed or driven out, and their scriptures scattered. It was a dark time for Buddhism in Japan. Flames engulfed the main hall and the temple's treasury. They melted statues and scrolls turned to ash. The great Buddha itself was damaged, but thanks to the foresight of the temple's priests, some texts were saved. They'd been hidden in stone containers underground. The Fujiwara loyalists refused to accept the new regime, and soon after, a civil war broke out. This Buddha was named Daibutsu, which means Great Buddha, and it sat in the center of a vast complex of halls and gardens. On the other was the Minamoto clan, led by Minamoto no Yoshinaka. But while this conflict might seem like an episode of Game of Thrones, it was actually pretty different. For one, the stakes weren't just the Iron Throne. Both sides were fighting to establish a new kind of government. Koromori wanted an aristocratic government run by the Taira clan, while Yoshinaka wanted a military government run by the Minamoto. And it wasn't just the leaders of these clans involved in the fight either. Everyone was welcome to pick a side. Commoners, farmers, merchants, even monks. The main hall was so huge that it dwarfed the main hall of the next closest Buddhist temple in Japan. During the war, temples were considered fair game, and this one in particular became a key asset for either side. See, temples didn't just house valuable artwork and scriptures. They also owned vast amounts of land, especially Todaji. Its estates spanned more than 13,000 acres across 8 provinces. So when Yoshinaka marched his troops south from Kyoto in 1180, he needed the temple's support. He sent one of his generals, 99-year-old Minamoto no Tomomitsu, to request aid. The general approached the temple's head priest and told him that if he joined the Minamoto cause, they would protect Todaji. If he refused, they would burn it down. The priest thought long and hard about this and eventually agreed to join the Minamoto. All told, the complex covered more than 25 acres. And along with the statues and paintings and calligraphy it housed, was considered one of the most important Buddhist sites in the country. and its importance only grew through the following centuries. That's certainly true of one of Japan's most important temples, Todaiji. In the 12th century, it was the biggest temple around. It housed one of the largest standing Buddhas in the world, and vast halls filled with priceless artworks. But by 1180, the temple stood at the center of a war, caught in the crossfire of two powerful clans fighting for dominance over the country. And there were many who wanted to tear down Todaiji and the rival Fujiwara clan that built it. Now, the Fujiwara controlled the imperial court and had since the late 7th century, though their grip on power was tenuous at best. Much of the country was ruled by provincial aristocrats, who often fought among themselves for more land and influence. And what better way to boost your status than by destroying your rival's most sacred space? Well, there were two ways. One was by starting a war, which was risky, or by marrying into the imperial family, which was easier but harder to get out of. For several centuries, the Fujiwara used both methods to increase their power. They went to war when they had to, but also married the emperor's sons and daughters, making them key players in succession disputes. To find out how this temple became ground zero of an ancient war, we'll have to go back to the beginning. The first thing you see when you enter Todaiji is this: a massive bronze statue of a smiling Buddha. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's loved. But the strategy eventually backfired. On one side was the Taira clan, led by Taira Koramori. And that brings us back to Todaiji. But while he promised aid, he did nothing. As the Taira soldiers moved in to defend, monks took these scriptures, hid them in their robes, and fled. When the smoke cleared, only the temple's 5-story pagoda was still standing. The rest was burnt to the ground. Yet the Taira victory was short-lived. See, when the war began, the monks of Todaiji took sides. Some joined the Minamoto, others the Taira. But like the phoenix rising from the ashes, the Buddhist order recovered. Eventually, Todaiji was restored to its former glory. But when we think of Todaiji today, we don't think of the war. Thanks for watching this episode of our Japan series. Our team spent a year traveling around the country to bring you this show. The Tale of Genji is widely considered the world's first novel. It follows the life of Prince Genji, his loves and losses, joys and intrigues. Set during the height of the Heian period, it gives us a window into a vanished world. Now, the Heian period began in 794, when the capital was moved to Nagaoka, Kyoto, then later to Heiankyo near present-day Kyoto. Like the hero of her novel, she belonged to the highest ranks of society. This was especially true in the city of Kyoto, which had become the center of a vast commercial network. Elite court painting was largely the work of aristocrats, who enjoyed painting as a refined hobby. It allowed for mass production of images, which could then be pasted onto walls or used as wrapping for gifts. The most famous genre of woodblock prints during this time depicted scenes from the tale of Genji. This was especially true in the realm of calligraphy, which was considered the highest form of artistic expression. The art of calligraphy was highly prized by the court nobility, who saw it as a way to demonstrate their cultivated tastes and high status. From the elegant poetry of Murasaki Shikibu to the delicate ink paintings of Tosa Moroku, the art of this period captures the essence of a bygone era. The courtly rituals and ceremonies of the Heian court are now a thing of the past, but they left behind a rich legacy of art and literature that continues to inspire and delight audiences today. The world of Genji may have been lost, but its memory lives on in the art and poetry of the Heian period. Calligraphy was also an important part of court rituals and ceremonies. In fact, the skill of a calligrapher was so important that special tools were developed to make very thin and very fine lines. It was believed that if one could master the art of calligraphy, one could achieve enlightenment. This may sound surprising, but it was not uncommon for people to spend years studying the art of calligraphy. They would practice writing characters over and over again until they could produce perfect specimens. The goal was to create characters that were not only beautiful to look at, but also conveyed the true meaning of the words they represented. One of the most famous calligraphers of the Heian period was Ono no Tofu. She was a court lady who lived in the 10th century, and her calligraphy was highly regarded by her contemporaries. Ono no Tofu was especially skilled at writing the kanji for the word woman, which she wrote in a flowing, elegant script that perfectly captured the feminine mystique. These images helped to spread the story of Genji and his loves throughout Japan. In fact, It was said that the most beautiful flowers were not those that were rare or exotic, but rather those that were arranged in the most artful manner. The art of flower arrangement was not merely a decorative practice, but rather a way to express one's aesthetic sensibility. It was believed that the arrangement of flowers could evoke a particular mood or atmosphere, and it was often used to enhance the beauty of a space. The basic principles of flower arrangement are still followed today. These include the importance of balance, harmony, and simplicity. In addition, the choice of flowers and the way they are arranged can also convey a deeper meaning. For example, the chrysanthemum was associated with the nobility, and the plum blossom was seen as a symbol of perseverance. By following these principles, one could create an arrangement that was both visually appealing and conceptually profound. Another popular art form was that of the illustrated hand scroll. These scrolls could be unfurled to reveal a single continuous image, often depicting a landscape or a historical scene. The illustrations were done in black and red ink, which gave them a bold graphic quality. These hand scrolls were meant to be viewed in an upright position, unlike the more horizontal picture scrolls popular in China. This innovation allowed for greater freedom of composition, as well as more dynamic use of line and color. They favored subjects that celebrated the natural world, such as landscapes, flowers, and birds. This type of paper was cheaper and more widely available, which helped to fuel the demand for paintings and prints. People also started keeping albums of paintings, which they would bind together with silk or hemp cord. These albums were often given as gifts or used to display one's wealth and status. One notable artist from this period was Tosa Moroku. He was one of the leading court painters of his day, and his work was highly sought after by aristocrats. Masto Moro was especially skilled at depicting landscapes, and his paintings often had a dreamlike quality to them. Another talented painter was Fujiwara no Takanobu, who was active during the late Heian period. Takanobu was a court noble, and his paintings reflected his high status. They were often done on silk and featured elegant ladies in luxurious surroundings. Despite the popularity of Chinese-inspired painting during this time, there was also a growing interest in native Japanese subjects. This was likely due to the increased contact between the court and the common people, as well as a desire to assert Japanese identity in the face of Chinese influence. As a result, some artists began to experiment with new techniques and subject matter, paving the way for future developments in Japanese art. Popular painting, on the other hand, was done by professional artists who catered to the tastes of the merchant class. They produced paintings for everyday people to enjoy, often depicting scenes from daily life or popular legends. One of the most iconic images from Heian painting is the depiction of women. Heian women were renowned for their beauty and grace. They were often portrayed as ethereal beings who floated through the world like clouds. These paintings typically showed women engaged in various leisure activities, such as playing the zither, writing poetry, or simply strolling through gardens. The clothing worn by the women in these paintings was also highly stylized, with long flowing robes and elaborate headdresses. Merchants built large houses near the city walls, and they hired artisans to decorate them with paintings and calligraphy. Some of these works were highly influenced by Chinese motifs, while others reflected the unique tastes of the emerging merchant class. For example, landscapes, flower paintings, and scenes from daily life became very popular. Portraiture was also quite common, and merchants often commissioned paintings of themselves and their families to display in their homes. These portraits were not intended to capture a likeness, but rather to convey the sitter's status and wealth. As such, they are often idealized and highly stylized. Another popular subject was the depiction of courtesans. Courtesans were highly trained entertainers who specialized in singing, dancing, and playing various musical instruments. They were also expected to be skilled in the arts of love and seduction. As such, they were often portrayed as beautiful and mysterious creatures who inhabited a world separate from that of ordinary people. Although we know very little about her personal life, scholars believe that she may have lived a somewhat scandalous life for the time period. This would have given her insight into the intricacies of courtly love, as well as the darkness that lurks beneath the shimmering surface of the imperial court. In addition to writing the tale of Genji, she was also an accomplished poet and calligrapher. Her handwriting is included in the famous collection, the Ten-Sayopkinum. These poems are mostly about love and nature, and they show off her talent for combining simple language with deep meaning. She mastered the art of brevity, often managing to express complex emotions in just a few carefully chosen words. And her calligraphy is considered one of the finest examples of the Heian period. It's precise, elegant, and free-flowing, demonstrating the high level of skill required to master this traditional Japanese art form. This was a time when Chinese culture was imported en masse and absorbed into Japanese society. So the art and literature of China, Korea, and Japan shared a common language. In fact, the Chinese classics were studied so thoroughly that Japanese literature of the time often imitates Chinese styles. For example, the Tale of Genji was written in the Chinese-inspired kana script, which was already several hundred years old by the time the novel was written. And although Chinese models heavily influenced early kana writing, over time, Japanese writers developed their own unique style. As mentioned earlier, the Tale of Genji is considered the first novel in the world, because its narrative and character development far surpass anything written before it. But there are also some significant differences between the Tale of Genji and Western novels. For instance, the main character never has any control over his own destiny. He's merely a pawn of the gods, moving and acting as they please. Even his name, Genji, means nothing more than born of the shining light. Throughout the novel, he is known by many epithets based on his actions or lineage, but never by any personal name. There is no sense of ownership over his identity. His life is defined by other people, especially women, and ultimately he is judged by their whims. We can perhaps best understand Genji through the eyes of the woman who narrates the story. She is a distant relative, having been born on the fringes of the imperial family. Her father, the emperor, keeps a large harem of concubines and mistresses. But he ignores all of them after the birth of Genji, with no mother to protect him. Genji must rely on his sister-in-law, who eventually becomes his foster mother. She is the only person who treats him like a human being, and she is also the only person who sees beyond his status. She understands what it means to be alive. When she dies, Genji loses his connection to reality, and he quickly wastes away. Without his guiding light, Genji drifts from one woman to another, never finding rest. All of the women in his life reflect different aspects of his psyche, and they are all beautiful, refined, and cultivated. Their grace is both captivating and tragic. For Genji is destined to suffer because of his beauty, just as the cherry blossoms fall and wither. So let us now slip from ash and stone to painted screens and perfumed sleeves. The Heian period, particularly the 11th and 12th centuries, was an era of courtly refinement. In the imperial capital of Heiankyo, now Kyoto, life among the nobility was governed not by labor or war, but by aesthetics. Noblemen wore layered robes of colored silk, each hue selected according to season and symbolism. Women, too, draped themselves in elegant layers, their black hair trailing behind them like rivers. A noblewoman might spend her day composing waka poetry, exchanging letters folded with precision and scented with incense. Men debated which flowers best suited an evening gathering. Every gesture had weight. Every movement was rehearsed. Court life revolved around ritual, not religious ritual, but social performance. How one entered a room, responded to a poem, or arranged a vase spoke volumes. But beneath the surface of this beauty lay fragility. The court was insular, detached from the shifting realities of the provinces. While nobles refined their handwriting, warriors gathered power in the shadows. Many could not see the end coming, and yet their world left behind treasures. The Tale of Genji, ink paintings, delicate screen art, all reflecting an age where the ephemeral was everything. They lived in a dream of elegance, floating above the earth like petals on a stream. In today's video, we're going to look at the most prominent art forms of the Heian period: literature, calligraphy, and painting. The Tale of Genji was written by Murasaki Shikibu, a lady-in-waiting to the Empress. Though court life is the primary focus of the Tale of Genji, there was also a great deal of cultural exchange happening between the aristocracy and the merchant class. Painting in the Heian period can be divided into two major categories: elite court painting and popular painting. As for the popular arts, woodblock printing was a new technique introduced during the Heian period. Throughout the Heian period, people experimented with different types of paper, including one made from the hemp plant. One of the defining characteristics of Heian literature and art was the emphasis on elegance and refinement. And finally, I'd like to talk about the art of flower arrangement, which was also highly developed during the Heian period. The Heian period was a time of great beauty and refinement in Japan. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please click the like button and subscribe for more content. Now, as our journey through medieval Japan comes to a close, let your thoughts settle like falling sakura blossoms. From the hard floors of mountain temples to the inked dreams of visionaries, from sacred fires to silent poems exchanged behind screens, we have walked among lives ruled by rhythm, devotion, and beauty. These lives, though distant, remind us of something still within reach: the value of stillness, of quiet persistence, of seeking meaning not in noise, but in subtlety. Let the silence of the monastery wrap around you. Let the brushstrokes of the court lull you to rest. And as you drift towards sleep, carry with you the echoes of wooden clappers, temple bells, and the soft rustle of silk. Good night.